Good evening, everyone. Thank you very much. It's 6 o'clock, so we'll get started. But before we start the formal meeting this evening, I would just like us to take a moment to remember Councillor Nick Cope, who sadly passed at the beginning of the week, and also the continuing quite terrible events which are going on in the Ukraine. So I would ask us to please take a minute's silence and remember Councillor Cope. Thank you. Thank you for that, everybody. I know that there will be other occasions, of course, to talk about Nick's huge contribution to public life in Colchester, but as the first meeting since his passing, I felt it was important that we noted that this evening. So we will begin with some formal announcements and say good evening to you all. And I shall begin with action in the event of an emergency. There are no practice alarms planned for this evening, but if an alarm sounds, please evacuate the town hall by going down the main staircase or the back staircase to the High Street and then to the car park behind the town hall in St Runwald Street. This meeting is being broadcast live over the internet on the council's YouTube channel and will also be available to listen to afterwards. I can assure those watching that a COVID risk assessment has been undertaken for this meeting and the meeting room is set up to meet social distancing requirements. Whilst we are not wearing masks while seated, these will be worn if and when we leave our seats. The use of mobile phones and other devices, including cameras by visitors, is welcomed, but you are requested to use them discreetly, to set them to silent, and not to use voice or camera flash functions. Speakers are reminded that microphones are to be used at all times. And I shall just introduce the work of the Cabinet. For the benefit of members of the public, I would like to explain that the Cabinet is the main executive body of the Council. It is responsible for day-to-day decision-making on all council services and also makes recommendations to full council on major policy issues and on the council's budget. The Cabinet is made up of 6 councillors, each of whom is responsible for a particular range of services. I am Councillor Paul Dundas. I'm the leader of the council. I represent Stanway Ward, and I shall now ask other councillors and officers to introduce themselves, going round that way.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Councillor Sue Lissimore. I'm the Deputy Leader of Colchester Borough Council and Portfolio Holder for Resources.
Good evening. I'm Councillor Simon Crowe. I'm Portfolio Holder for Environment and Sustainability.
Hello, Councillor Darius Laws, Portfolio Holder for Economy, Business and Heritage.
Good evening, Councillor Andrew Ellis, Portfolio Holder for Housing and Planning.
Good evening, Councillor Beverley Oxford, Portfolio Holder for Communities.
Adrian Pritchard, Chief Executive of Colchester Borough Council.
Andrew Weavers, Monitoring Officer.
Richard Clifford, Lead Democratic Services Officer.
Thank you all and welcome. So proceeding with the agenda, item number 2 is urgent items. I know we do have one recommendation from the policy panel, which we'll take first, and then we'll see if there are any other items. This is from the policy panel last week. I think as this is the last cabinet of the civic year, I think it's actually important we do take it, otherwise it would be slipping into July, I would imagine, June, July. I'm not sure if it was in the agenda pack, but I'll just read out the 3 recommendations for everybody. And it's recommended to Cabinet that A, Cabinet approves the refurbishment of the Anglican Chapel at Colchester Cemetery including work to make this a site of commemoration for the COVID-19 pandemic. B, Cabinet considers how residents can be consulted via the Council's website to seek views on local commemorative sites. And C, Cabinet makes available match funding for spending from members' locality budgets on commemorations relating to COVID-19. From my personal point of view, I have certainly absolutely no problem with A and B. A, we have taken the decision to finally refurbish the chapel. It's one of two chapels in Colchester Cemetery. I understand it's been lying empty or fairly derelict for quite a number of years whilst debates happen as to what to do with it, but we felt it was important that we didn't let it deteriorate anymore. We got on and did something about it. And I think using it in some way, either totally or partially towards the commemoration of the COVID-19 pandemic would be a very good use for it. So I would certainly support that. And I certainly don't have any problem with part B. But obviously part C has potential budget implications over £100,000. So I don't know if perhaps portfolio holder for resources, you might like to comment on this one.
Thank you. Yes, I do find it rather ironic that the former administration actually wanted to halve the members' locality budget rather than actually increase it, which, as I say, is very ironic to me. I personally believe, and with the way the budget is at the moment, that we have adequate funding within the locality fund and also within the Woodland and Diversity Fund as well to actually be able for local councillors to commemorate in whichever way that they feel that they should be able to. So I do not personally feel that C is necessary either. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So Cabinet member, I don't know if anybody else wishes to comment. No, I can't see anybody. So I think, are we okay to accept A and B? Those recommendations, agreed. I think the C, I don't think because we have just passed a budget, and obviously it has a fairly large budgetary effect. Obviously, I'm quite happy to say to the portfolio holder for resources, if there are options out there, maybe match funding from other sources, they do exist. By all means, we'll look at it. But I think as a recommendation, because it will affect the budget so much, we probably logistically can't accept that one tonight. So we're agreed with that. Okay, thank you. Any other urgent items? Councillor Laws.
Thank you, Leader. I'll be very brief. Leader, Cabinet, it came to my attention in recent days about some disparaging personal remarks that were made on social media by an established Colchester political party's social media channel. I have today written to the councillors of that party to give them an opportunity to distance themselves from this sort of behaviour. And from the Conservative group's point of view, where we have disagreement, we do so in a civilised, professional manner. That is all I want to say on the matter.
Okay, thank you for that. Do we have any others? No, I see nobody indicating. So we'll move on to item 3, which is declarations of interest. Do we have any declarations of interest this evening? I see nobody indicating. I'll take that as a negative. Obviously, if any come up in the course of the agenda, please indicate and declare them. Item 4 is minutes of the previous meeting. Are there any comments on that, or do we take them as agreed? Agreed. I see everybody agreeing. That's good. So we'll move on to item 5, which is have your say. And we have 3 speakers on this item. You have 3 minutes each. The bell will sound after 2 to give you fair warning. And then will sound again at 3 minutes when I would ask you to please wind up promptly. Our first speaker this evening is Chris Piggott. Chris, are you here? You are. Yes, please come forward. Press the button on the microphone to speak and the light will come on.
Good evening. I've been impressed with the recent investment to modernise and improve some of our town's car parks. St Mary's car park now has a more appealing and overall better first impression for shoppers and visitors when they park up. Our car parks have been neglected for years, especially the multi-storey ones. They're really dingy and old-fashioned, So it's really encouraging to see the council make the step we need to keep up with the competitive and challenging market, simplifying things as much as possible to compete with the convenience of online shopping. Many people rely on their cars to get to town, particularly in the south of Colchester. What are the plans, if any, to continue this investment in more of our town's car parks in the area, and do we have a plan to introduce more electric vehicle charging points around the town, such as the ones on Butt Road and in Priory Street car park, to encourage the transition to more climate-friendly vehicles and adhere to our net zero commitments? Thank you.
Thank you, and I apologise for the extra noises during that. I'm not sure what was going. Councillor Crowe, I think this is probably your portfolio.
Thank you, Chair. Okay, just to start off, I've been advised by Democratic Services just to declare that Mr. Piggott is a sort of relative of mine. He's my daughter's fiance and the father of my granddaughter. So that just for transparency. So thank you for your question tonight. I'm so impressed with what's being done in St Mary's car park. It's quite stunning when you drive in there. You don't think you're in the same building. And when I went along to see it for myself, I took my little two-door car with me and parked in one of those spaces that was built in the 1970s. And there was barely any room to get out of the car unless you're Mr. Fantastic from the Fantastic Four and can stretch your body to slide out. So creating those extra wide spaces is so needed. And we do hope to continue that around the rest of the car park and maybe take that on to our other multi-storey car park. And also that the paint on the floor just smartens everything up, and the green painted walkway so pedestrians know where they're meant to be. The whole thing is quite a transformation. And improving our car parks has been a priority of this administration and cabinet. Over the past 10 months, I've been working with officers to develop a long-term parking estate plan for this very purpose, which of course is being considered a long-time wider transport planning and wider master planning for the town centre. We've also opened the first 3 electric vehicle charging points in Priory Street car park and plan to install them in our other car parks throughout the borough as and when we can. And unfortunately, on-street charging is the responsibility of Essex County Council, and I think they're reviewing that at the moment. The exact locations of the next charging points and when they're going to be installed will be announced in due course. And we're also due to submit a draft bid to the Office of Zero Emission Vehicles in the coming days for access to their grant funding to support these installations, which will be focused around car parks in residential areas. And the current charging points in Priory Street is going very well, and we're getting some excellent feedback from people who've been using it. So once again, thank you for your question.
Thank you, Councillor Crowe. And Mr. Piggott, thank you very much for coming along. Our next speaker is Sir Bob Russell. I don't think I need to tell Sir Bob how the system works. I think he's quite used to it. So welcome, Sir Bob, and you have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman. I was a founder member of the Liberal Democratic Party, and I was proud to represent the town's Liberal Democrat MP for 18 years. And although I'm no longer actively involved in politics, I do continue to take an interest in what's going on. And in that respect, Chairman, I think the comments attributed in the Gazette on Monday against yourself and Councillor Bentley were completely out of order and were not in accord with the Borough Council's declaration not that long ago that there should be respect shown for people within parties and across parties. There are many good people in Colchester Liberal Democrats, and although I'm no longer actively involved, I don't think the comments made were made in their name. My inquiries suggest that the person who made those comments may not even be a member of the Liberal Democrats. And if she is, it's difficult to know how she has a membership when she resides in Holland. I think the leadership of the Liberal Democrats in Colchester should sack that person, distance themselves in the interests of their own party and their own integrity. I'd like to publicly thank Councillor Sue Lissamore as County Councillor Hat. Within the 48 hours ago, the bollards at Headgate were removed. 20 months of chaos and congestion in Colchester were lifted at a stroke. And I thank her for that. And I now hope that she'll do the same from North Station Bridge towards the Essex Hall roundabout, where Colchester boasts the only bus lane in the country from which buses are banned. A bus lane that cost about £1 million and built only 7 years ago, and which is shunned by cyclists anyway. It's an absolute waste of time. And while we're about it, let's have a permanent no to the proposal, which still exists, to ban traffic coming into North Station Road from Middleborough from south to north. That still exists, notwithstanding statements in leaflets put out by the Liberal Democrats and the Green Party saying the scheme had been dropped. It hasn't, it's still there. Lastly, but not least, I hope the Crouch Street scheme can be looked at by the whole Colchester Borough Council. Chairman, I sent out an email, admittedly only 48 hours ago, but only 4 councillors responded, and the only one who did it in a serious manner was Councillor Sue Lissamore, for whom I again thank. That's not bad, 2 thanks in less than 3 minutes. Councillor Lee Tate and Councillor Lewis Barber said they couldn't be present on the suggested night, a night that had all been reserved for a council meeting, which had been delayed till later in the year. But although Councillor Barber said he supported what was going on, and Councillor Steph Nissen, who informed me should get back to me within 14 days. So just as well, it's not urgent. Chairman, there are those who want Colchester to take back highways. If they can't respond to an email, I don't think they're serious. Thank you.
Thank you, Sir Bob. On the initial comments, I won't comment on the internal machinations of other parties. I think we all have people in our parties, or sometimes connected or not even that connected with our parties, who embarrass us. My recommendation to all parties is, when you've got people like that, get rid of them. Get rid of them promptly, because they will come back and bite you. And I'd also say the expression, if you're in a hole, don't keep digging, would be quite applicable, but I won't say any more on that. I'll let Councillor Lissamore come in a second, but I just want to comment very briefly on the bus lane. I share a lot of your frustrations with that. I've been asking at the legendary TCBGC meetings, and again at the committee last week, that of course that route forms part of the RTS. So we are, I've asked Essex County Council, if the RTS is going to go through there, what is the plan in terms of how you get it through there on time? And I'm still not sure the answer's quite clear. So I do see your frustrations, but I'll let Councillor Lissamore come in on bollards.
Thank you. Yes, I was extremely pleased to see today that the bollards had been removed. Yes, they should have been removed earlier. Unfortunately, it was a bit of a perfect storm with regard to Christmas, New Year, COVID, officer sickness, whatever excuse, was being thrown around at the time, but they are gone. I think where the confusion is coming from, and I'm speaking completely honestly here, is the wish of the future schemes that may or may not get funding in however many years' time. There is a steering group which has run, as Sir Bob knows, for 2 years now, which I only took over the chair of in May this last year. That steering group has been looking at these projects for up to 2 years. Including Crouch Street. They did not get the funding that they believed that they might have been getting, and so some of the schemes were cut. Now, I'm not going to say temporarily. I think in an officer's perfect world, we will eventually, I say we, sorry, highways, Essex County Council will get the funding, and therefore other schemes will be looked at, i.e. Butt Road and other areas. At present, we are being told it is highly unlikely we will get any more funding. Therefore, officers felt they wanted to keep the Headgate cycle route there, just in case they got the funding in the future. I did not believe, because all the signs that I was being given was the chances are Essex are not going to get funding in the very near future for a continuation of these cycle lanes. And so therefore I believed that the cycle path needed to go. And I think that is where the confusion is coming as well with regards to the banning of cars in North Station Road. If the funding came through in the future, that might be something that is looked at again by the steering group. However, as things stand at the moment, the funding is not in place. Therefore, it is not going ahead. That is my stance on it from taking over as the chair of the steering group last May. So thank you for your comments. I believed always that cycle lane, certainly on Headgate, should not be there. And I'm sorry that it's taken so long to be removed, but I'm obviously very grateful that it has. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Crowe, I think you indicated.
Thank you, Chair. I can't add much to what Councillor Dundas and Councillor Lissamore have already said. I just wanted to touch briefly on that tweet. I just checked and it's still there. And I'm rather sad that all these days on, that's not been removed. I don't think the whole thread needs to be removed, but that particular tweet could be deleted, I think. I think if there's any Liberal members in the House, and I can't see without my glasses to tell you, that they should see to getting that done. Lib Dem, sorry, not Liberal. And I too am pleased to see the bollards gone, though somewhat amused to see that people are still acting as if they're still there and queuing up in the left-hand lane. So they certainly did a good job of conditioning people. So, and one last thing, the bus gate on North Station Road, as Councillor Lissamore said, there is no funding for it. It is aspirational for some people. And as we've discussed, I did argue against it and I did vote against it, and given future opportunities too, I'll continue to do so. I do not believe that's the solution for North Station Road, and I think it's punitive to people who live in the streets off North Station Road and the businesses that operate there. So I am, for the public record, firmly against it. Thank you.
I think Councillor Lissamore just wants to come back on something.
Yes, I just wanted to clarify one point. Councillor Crowe was the only councillor on the steering, or the only person on the steering group who voted against the bus gate. All the other councillors who are both borough and county councillors and the other members of the steering group all voted for it. And Councillor Crowe was the only one. I abstained because I was chairman, but Councillor Crowe was the only one that voted against it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Ellis.
Just quickly, Chairman, because I always ask officers to explain exactly what they mean when they use letters. RTS, which you used as rapid transit system, just so that people are aware. I'm sure Sir Bob knows what it is, but just in case for the recording, other members don't know what a rapid transit system is. That's what you were referring to with your RTS. So,
thank you for that clarification and a very good point. I'll just pick up all what other people have said. I mean, one of the issues I had with that particular lane was, regardless of any other long-term plans, is that we're meant to be encouraging people perhaps to use public transport more, use the bus more. What it was doing, and I know this because I do use the bus quite a lot, and I experienced it on a number of occasions, it was taking 20 minutes on the bus to get from the bottom of Malden Road to Headgate. So you just sat there in stationary traffic on the bus. And I just sat there and thought, well, actually, if I'm going to have to do this, I may as well just got in my car and sat there in comfort listening to Radio 4. Other radio stations are available. So I just, it wasn't working. It wasn't working, and was throwing all the bus timetables out and just causing chaos, particularly on evenings in the town. On the full council, I do have some sympathy with that. I think one of the problems is that obviously having councilled that date, particularly with elections coming, a lot of people have gone off and booked other things. So people were struggling with that date, even when we put it in provisionally for the local plan, and we were having a big problem that we had a lot of groups saying, well, I've got loads and loads of people missing. So it's proving actually very challenging even before. I thought we might actually have to council it for the local plan, simply because we had about 6 people from our group who had other commitments they couldn't get out of. So it might be difficult logistically to do, but personally, I hope after May, we will be back in the council chamber, and that will mean actually arranging things like emergency or short notice full councils are a lot easier to do and a lot less costly as well. But I do understand the point. Thank you. If you want to come back very, very briefly, Sir Bob, I'll give you 10 seconds.
Chairman, I've just observed the gap between two council meetings is 5 months. 5 months without a full meeting of the council. I don't think that's good for local democracy.
No, it is.
Can I make a suggestion that we have all out elections?
Thank you very much. Our next speaker is Mr. Nick Chilvers. Nick, you're very welcome. You have 3 minutes. The bell will sound after 2.
Thank you, Chairman. You'll have read in the Gazette about the flooding along Haven Road. In fact, the last headline was something about bring a dinghy. As it is, when approaching Haven Road from Whitehall, you either chance the water or do a 2-mile detour to get across the river. Now, I know Colchester Council isn't responsible and doesn't have the power to actually remedy it, but you might have to put some money in the pot, because after all, you've allowed the building and the area to be concreted over. But let's put that to one side. I know a task force has been set up. Will Quince has been involved. Ward councillors have been raising on behalf of residents. I take the view that Colchester Council leader and the chief executive officers are the 2 most senior officials in the borough. I ask, therefore, if and when either of you have sent a shirty letter to Essex Highways and Angling Water to complain on behalf of residents. Have you had a meeting with them in your office to gee them up? Have you been down there with the tide flapping around your wellies, talking to residents and businesses to show concern? Are you content to leave it to other officers and councillors and the task group? Sometimes it looks like the council policy is not to challenge or upset Essex County Council. Now we have Anglian Water, that faceless organisation. And now I imagine the response will be tonight, we've been working behind the scenes with partners and progress is being made. Well, if so, what? People need to know. You could, now as far as communication is concerned, you've got 3 parties involved, the communication's been pathetic. You could help there. It's serious. A nightmare deserves high-level intervention. So please show the leadership needed, get on the backs of Essex County Council and Anglian Water to make it a priority and get progress. I'm not taking a political stance on this, but I bet if it was the other side of town, it'd be all over it like a rash. Now, Essex County Council and Anglian Water are service providers. We, including the council, are their customers. So please stand up for us and tell them, and putting it quite plainly, to pull a finger out. Get something done. Enough is enough. People on the eastern side of Colchester have suffered with this nightmare for far too long. Thank you.
Thank you. Obviously, I'll pick up the points addressed directly to me and the Chief Executive. Does any other portfolio holders who've been involved wish to comment? Councillor Crowe. Oh, beg your pardon, yeah. Oh, well, I have been involved, and to answer your question, have there been meetings with Essex County Council? The answer is yes. We've had them down there. We've had the portfolio holder down there. We spent about 2 hours showing them every bit of the problem. We had a good look at the issue with the distillery pond all the way up to Bourne Pond, and the fact that when the tide is in, there is constant water flowing down an ancient Victorian gully, because what's happening is that the flood water, when there's a high tide, is not seawater, it's fresh water. So what happens is when the tide comes in, there is a flap which closes to stop the tide water coming up into the road, into the drainage system. But when that's closed, obviously fresh water can't go out. So the question is where that fresh water is all coming from. Now, I understood that they thought it was coming from Distillery Pond, but they're not so sure now. And the whole issue has been that I would not have a problem with Colchester Borough Council if we were asked to perhaps contribute financially to a solution. But what has not happened yet is that what they've come forward and said, this is the problem, this is what needs to be done, this is the solution, it will cost X amount. So until we have that, I can't say yes or no to contributing money. What we have done is, as you may well be aware, there was a maintenance issue with the flap, that it had silted up. So actually for a while it was also letting in seawater, or once it closed, it didn't open. So the next time it rained, even at low tide, it all flooded. And it actually turned out there was a massive great piece of wood jammed in it. So what we have agreed is that that needs a monthly maintenance regime. So we have agreed from CBC's point of view that we will pay a third of it. We'll pay a third, Anglian Water will pay a third, and Essex County Council will pay a third. But we need an actual solution. And we're not the experts, CBC, because we're not experts on water, we're not experts on roads. We need the other parties to actually put a detailed design forward of this is the problem and this is what needs to be done. It's very frustrating. This seems to be going on for 15, 20 years and nobody's really worked out what the fundamental problem is. I can't believe it's beyond the wit of man that, to find out. But yeah, I have been very frank with Essex County Council. I do criticise Essex County Council when necessary, hence I was talking about their ridiculous bollards earlier on. I have no hesitation in criticising Essex County Council and Anglian Water. I think this has been going on for far too long, and I do share your frustration. It is not being ignored at all. I'm very well aware of it. I go through there very, very often. I know what the situation is, and when we get a solution, when the experts actually tell us this is what needs to be done, we'll do it. Does anybody else wish to comment? Yeah, Councillor Crowe.
Again, tonight, I can't add much to what Councillor Dundas has already said. I remember that flooding back in the 80s when I was a sales rep working for a local printers with customers down on Commerce Way and making the mistake of going that way sometimes. But it does seem to be worse in recent years. It does seem to be deeper, but and it may seem like Will Quince has set up this Hythe task force and it's just been all talk, as some mischief making has been saying in the last couple of weeks. A lot has been achieved. He's actually got all the agencies together because we didn't know exactly what the problem was, what was causing it, and it's going to require a multi-agency solution. And I can tell you that one thing that Essex Fire and Rescue have come up with is a plan to try and pump the water as it's appearing out of the drains and pump it into the river. So they're going to do an experiment down there to see if that works. We also did, and in that event, Essex County Council and the Environment Agency are then going to, if it works, they're going to seek funding to pay for a permanent pump, which brings with it the whole problem of who's going to go and turn the pump on when there's a high tide due. But that's another bridge that needs to be crossed. I've also, I think, as Councillor Dundas said, agreed to pay towards maintenance of the drain flap with Anglia Water and Essex County Council. That's not our responsibility, but we're paying towards that. So things are happening, and it's frustrating when you hear people talking about it and you don't see results. But it's not through lack of effort, and we are trying.
Thank you, Councillor Crowe. Yeah, just to reiterate on the pump, I've seen it sort of mentioned that, will CBC commit immediately to a pump? Well, we need to find out if it works. What I don't want to do is end up committing large amounts of public money and CBC money to something which doesn't work, because then we're back at square one, except we haven't got a budget anymore. So if it does work as an experiment, then obviously that's something we can actually seriously consider. To give you an example of how difficult it is, a few months ago, they decided that perhaps the main issue was Distillery Pond. So I believe there was an experiment where they drained it prior to the high tide, so it wasn't running, thinking that that would prove that that was where it was all coming from. And lo and behold, the tide came in and a load of fresh water appeared from somewhere. So we could have actually spent £1 million sorting out the water from Distillery Pond, which would have achieved absolutely nothing. So this is why we do actually have to find out what is going on. And I'll be frank, we're not experts in water management. So we need somebody to tell us. If it's very brief, yes.
It will be brief. Well, thank you for that. I can tell you, all the locals say that it never used to flood as high as that and as regularly as it does. The other thing is, as I said, if you say it's been going on for ages, you wonder who they've got on the job. You know, I know you're not experts, but you do wonder if they've employed Arthur Reddick Snail on the job, because it ought to have been sorted by now. Communication, perhaps you can help there. There's no reason why we can't take an advert, large advert, local paper, and tell people what's going on.
I think that's a fair
no
comment.
good telling just me, everybody else wants to know.
I think that's a fair comment. Councillor Ellis, you just want to come in briefly.
I always like having Mr. Chilvers here because I think he talks a lot of sense a lot of the time. Two things. One, I'd say my wife actually uses that every day to go to Clacton when you're saying people don't, people aren't interested, or we might not be interested in it because we're not that side of town or don't live that side of town. Actually, Nikki goes to Clacton Hospital daily and has to go through that. And when I get there, I got there 2 days ago, I think, and I turned around and I took a long way. I took a long route back because she said, oh no, you'll be able to go through it. And I decided I couldn't. However, I think the most important thing you've said tonight actually is about communication. And I think that is probably the issue, the frustration. We know something's going on. I attended one of these meetings in Paulstead because he couldn't make it and he was engaged elsewhere, and I went along to it. I found out a lot of things I didn't know, and actually I don't think that it would do any harm for us to have something on our website. It's not beyond the wit of man just to put something on the website so there's actually we're able to update it reasonably regularly, just to say a task force meeting has happened, this is what was discussed, this is what the outcomes were, and this is what they're doing. I think that would at least people would understand then what's going on, and I think that would serve to calm some of the angst that there is, because we all know it's a problem. We witness it all the time, that it's a problem. So actually, I think the communication is probably key, and you wouldn't have to come and say what's going on if you could read it and you knew what was going on, would you? So let's do that.
I think that's something for us to take on board. Thank you, Mr. Chilvers. Thank you. So we have 4 councillors, also under General Have Your Say, who are all joining us via Zoom. First, we have Councillor Fox. Councillor Fox, good evening. Can you hear us?
I can hear you, Leader. I hope you can hear me. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak to you and the Cabinet this evening. First of all, I'd like to associate myself with your remarks about the sad passing of Councillor Nick Cope. He'll be missed, I believe, across all the political parties in the council. And also about the ongoing situation in Ukraine. And I hope that as a council, we'll be supporting local families in Colchester who are seeking to bring family members who are seeking refuge to Colchester as well. I've certainly been contacted by people locally who are currently struggling with the government's visa system, and I hope that Colchester will welcome those people when they eventually arrive. I'd also say that I believe we all have a responsibility to uphold the highest standards in local politics as well. I know that's been discussed already this evening, and remarks about people's personal experience are totally uncalled for. If I could ask, please, the Deputy Leader and the Portfolio Holder for Resources, what the council, about the council tax rebate announced by the Chancellor. The cost of living crisis is already hitting local families hard in terms of increased energy prices, fuel prices, housing costs, and food as well. And could you tell me how many people in Colchester will benefit from this? Considering that people are already struggling, will everybody receive this rebate in April? And what process are you putting in place for those who are not paying by direct debit? I'd also like to ask whether the council is receiving an increase in challenges to council tax banding from those who are not in the bands A to D who are eligible for this. Because I understand that there are councils in other parts of the country receiving inquiries from people outside of those bands. And finally, I'd like to ask the portfolio holder for communities whether she will be voting for the town deal investment that includes youth investment in Highwoods tonight. Her ward colleague described that investment into a tiny, tiny bungalow that can't cater for the youth of Highwoods and was wholly not fit for purpose. There are people across the borough and in Highwoods who would rather that investment in the Highwoods leisure facilities, specifically sports facilities, including the courts and lighting. And that investment is desperately needed too. Thank you very much, Leader.
Thank you, Councillor Fox. Before I go to others, I'll just fully endorse your comments about the Ukraine. I've been contacted by residents as well, asking for help. What I would just say is I've been speaking to the Chief Executive, the Chief Executive Designate and other officers as to how prepared we are as a council. And I'm reassured that we are very prepared. We've got a fantastic track record, actually, of helping people in Colchester, and I'm confident we will do everything necessary again. But on the specifics, I'll go to Councillor Lissimore first.
Thank you, and thank you for the question, Councillor Fox. I've had some updates with regards to the council tax rebate, and the easy part of it is paying the money back to people who already pay by direct debit. We already have, therefore, a very safe, secure system in place to ensure that they get the rebate ASAP. The last update that I had was that they were still waiting for some guidance to come through from government, particularly on how to pay the rebate to people, to residents who do not pay by direct debit. That does cause a problem. So anyone who is listening, we urge residents to try, if they can, to pay for their council tax through direct debit. It is a safe system, it is a better system, and what has just been proven with this rebate is that it can be very, very beneficial. So there has been an increase of people, there already was an increase in people paying by direct debit through COVID. People felt that they wanted to automate things, and so the direct debit take-up had already increased anyway. But we are urging people to sign up to pay their council tax through direct debit so that we can get their rebate to them as quickly as possible. As far as I'm aware, we are still waiting for guidance from government about how we can ensure that those who do not pay by direct debit get their rebate as quickly and as safely as possible.
Thank you, Councillor Lissimore. I'll go to Councillor Oxford next, who I can just about see behind the camera.
Thank you. I was going to talk about it when we got to it on the agenda, but I can do it now. Yes, I will be supporting it. There's been a little bit of confusion because it keeps being called that it's a youth centre, where actually it isn't what people think of as youth centre, where you would have clubs and things like that, which is because it is not big enough to do it. So I'd like to thank Pam Donnelly for giving up her time, and also Ben, who is an extremely avid youth worker. We had a very good meeting yesterday afternoon, and what we've decided is that instead of keep calling it Highwoods Youth Centre to stop the confusion, we're going to start calling it a Highwoods Resource Centre, because that's actually what they do. They put resources into the young people that may be being excluded or having problems. Young people can go there for advice and things like that. So a youth centre is not really what it is. And one of the reasons why I'm going to support it now is because the money that is going to be put into it to revamp it, do different things to the building, make it a better building, will also hopefully lead to other grants and money coming through, so then more can be done to that youth centre, resource centre, so then it can be better than it is now, and therefore cater for a lot more people than it does now, with the possibility of having youth clubs or things like that there, because by starting this as a small step, hopefully it will grow and the money will come forward, because people will see that what is being done is such a good idea. They will help to support it by giving what is needed, which is the funding and the money to increase the building, to make the building a lot more fit for purpose than it is now. So yes, I will be supporting it.
Thank you, Councillor Oxford. Councillor Fox, I hope that answers your questions.
Thank you very much, Leader. I wondered if Councillor Lismore could just furnish me with the figures around those who are likely to benefit from the council tax rebate in Colchester, and I hope that she is pushing the government for that advice, because this funding is absolutely vital to households, and it's a shame that that advice has not come through from the government yet, and it suggests that the rebate scheme is currently not fit for purpose. And it is also good to hear Councillor Oxford distancing herself from the remarks made by her ward colleague earlier in the week. Thank you.
Mr. Clifford has made notes of your request for the figures, and I will ensure that they are sent through to you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Fox. We'll move on to our next speaker, who is Councillor Harris, who is also joining us via Zoom. Good evening, Councillor Harris.
Good evening, Leader. It's so great to see you all there remotely, and thank you for letting me join you from a distance like this, because it's so green, isn't it? And for our climate change ways, not to be able to get in a car and drive to you when I can do it adequately well from here in the comfort of my own home. But Leader, I've got a few questions, and I understand that, you know, if they're too technical, if they're technical of the questions I'm asked, I may have to get a written reply, but I'll ask them anyway with your permission. My first is continuing on the theme about climate change and green issues. Most people, Leader, in your area, in my area, across whole of Colchester, are proud of doing their bit for recycling. In fact, some of my neighbours are avid about it. They're really enthusiastic. But to get our figures for recycling improving, could Colchester Council think about a strong strategy of identifying the few residents who perhaps need a bit of coaching, need some help to participate in planet-saving habits, to reuse, recycle, can do some proactive engagement? That's the first question. The second one, continuing on the climate change and green theme, is about LED lighting, Leader. Now, you will have seen, as I have, lots of our Colchester Borough area lights being changed by Essex County Council to LED. Very pleased about that. That's a brilliant thing, and something that I've been campaigning for many, many years. But it's great to see it. And I've been told this week, Leader, that by the end of 6 months, all of Colchester Council area will have street lights of LED. Apparently ECC have done their homework and found out that it's efficient, not only in energy saving, but in costs in the long term. And my question is about Colchester Borough Council owned property. In other words, Colchester Borough homes, like they have lights on traditional land. For example, flats where we may think about changing our assets and doing the same strategy. Have we thought about where we can improve our record on LED in Colchester Borough homes, please? And my last question really is about licensing objectives, and I guess that's Councillor Darius Laws, I'm guessing, who you'll get to reply here, but I've probably got the same view as him, but I'll test him on that. The promoting of the licensing objectives is so important, and I wonder if he had a view on how we can strengthen that promotion of our licensing objectives in light of recent summary review called in by the police on 2 premises in our Colchester Borough in the last few months. I'm hoping those questions find favour with you, and I'm hoping that you'll be able to answer them in person. But if not, I will take a written reply, Leader. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Harris. Some good questions there. I think I spotted a question for Councillor Crowe, for Councillor Ellis, and for Councillor Laws there. So we'll go in that order. Councillor Crowe, on the recycling, please.
Thank you, Councillor Harris, for sharing your concerns about recycling. It is frustrating when there are households who are trying to avoid doing it. During the 10 months of this administration, we have run and are still running comms campaigns to try and educate residents to make them understand the importance of recycling. And we've also started enforcing that the 3-bag rule. Again, that makes it difficult for people not to recycle it. If they're putting out 4 or 5 bags and they've got stuff hidden in there they could be recycling, it's not so easy when they have to go back down to the limits that everyone else is adhering to. But your suggestion about engaging with households that aren't, it's certainly interesting and could certainly form part of a conversation I'll have with officers.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Ellis.
Yeah, I'm going to give you a written response as to exactly where, if you would like it, Dave. It's in our HRA that we're improving the energy efficiency across the borough's housing stock. If you want to know specifics, I'm quite happy to give you a much more detailed response on specifics. I have got them. Okay, but we budgeted. It was in the HRA that we spoke about at the last cabinet, I think, when you were here.
Thank you, Councillor Eddie. The last one was on licensing. Off the top of my head, I think it is in Councillor Law's portfolio. It might be in Councillor Oxford, but Councillor Laws, the question was directed to you.
Very briefly, thank you for your question, Councillor Harris. You are an exemplary councillor on your work with licensing over the years. I know you care passionately about making the borough of Colchester as safe as it can be and enjoyable for all. And I do remember you vividly saying things to me like, you know, would you be happy with your sister going home in that taxi or into that venue? And I think that is relevant. And it's not a sexist comment, it's just a very real comment that I endorse. Look, where we're going with this is to continue strengthening the amazing relationships that we have. We have officers that are proactive out there on Friday and Saturday nights, and us councillors have often the opportunity to go out and join them and to see what's going on with our own eyes, which I think is important. We are going to continue our amazing partnership work with Essex Police. And I think also ultimately we need to continue fostering a culture which basically stamps out any misdemeanors, be that things that are happening within venues or close to venues. We are open to hearing from members of the public as officers, as councillors, and of course if you want to contact the police about concerns, you can. Colchester is a safe place to enjoy in the day, afternoon and evening, but we will obviously want to keep that the way forever, and where there are the occasional blip, we want to stamp it out. But I thank you for your support, and if you do want any specific detail, then I'll happily share the information I can provide on that.
Thank you, Councillor Laws. I hope, Councillor Harris, I hope that answers your questions. I know there's one written answer being promised, so I hope that answers it for the time being.
Thank you very much, Leader. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Councillor G. Oxford, also joining us via Zoom. Good evening.
Chair, Councillor Oxford has had some difficulties joining us. We've had some technical issues.
Okay,
well,
what I would
liaise with him, but he hasn't joined us yet.
What I would suggest, if you could give me the nod, if he manages to rejoin, and then we'll go back to him if possible. So we'll go to Councillor Goss. Councillor Goss, good evening.
Hello, good evening. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak. Just wanted to say that I fully support the comments made about the very sad situation in Ukraine, and anything we can do to help house or support families would be extremely well supported, I think, by all parties. It's a very sad situation, and obviously the current situation with government and people getting into the UK from Ukraine has hit the headlines, but obviously that's a government issue they need to resolve quickly. And also thank you all for the very supportive and wonderful comments made about Councillor Cope. It was obviously a very shocking situation that just suddenly happened, and I think it's taken all of us by surprise. It wasn't expected, and obviously it's a very sad situation, and we're obviously supporting Liz at this time, and obviously we'll support the family. But yeah, thank you. Nick was very well regarded, very well respected, and an exemplary councillor that served since 1994. So yeah, thank you everybody. The reason I wanted to speak tonight was on an item that's coming up later, and this is about extending the outsourcing of the ID Verdi contract. I know a lot of us feel passionately about trying to bring it back in-house into neighbourhood services, and we would support doing that sooner rather than later. I know that this did have some debate at policy panel where I did speak, and I do understand some of the challenges we've got. I still think we could do it in 18 months. I think I know that we've got desires to make it a better service, but I think we could have done it. Where I was disappointed is the business case didn't mention anything about future accommodation. It was known that Shrub End wouldn't actually accommodate any equipment or new staff, and therefore we could have looked at it in a slightly different way and asked Amphora to obviously do some market testing on accommodation and costs, but which could have gone into the business case, but of course was totally ignored. So what I would say, though, of course, it's not extending the contract for 3 years. It's actually adding 3 years that takes it to 4.5 years. That's actually more than a council term. So that is a long, long period to leave it outsourced. We need to do whatever we can to shorten that contract and bring it back in-house professionally and build on the service that is there, because I do believe that there is more value add we can do. Bringing it in-house, more firepower we can offer the people of Colchester, and also some very good careers for people that will be employed by Colchester Council and not by a third party. So I passionately believe that is the right answer. I know we all do, but I don't think in 4.5 years' time is acceptable. We need to find ways to cut that timescale and make it much, much quicker. And I know that I do have support from other councillors on that point.
Thank you, and yeah, I'd endorse many of your comments there. I'd also, I think, on the grounds maintenance contract, I think there's quite a lot of agreement on it. Actually, it's desire versus practicality sometimes, and also finance. So the challenges around the budget, and actually around the physical capability of ensuring that if it was brought back in house, we could actually do a good job from day one. Because the last thing we want to do is take it back in-house and make a mess of it, not to put too fine a point on it. I know the policy panel did discuss it at length, and I know officers have done a great deal of work on this and have really researched it thoroughly. And I do think we have to take their recommendations very seriously. And when they say there's challenges, recognise it. But I'm probably stealing Councillor Oxford's thunder here, so I've probably stolen half her answer, so I do apologise. But would you like to come in, Councillor Oxford?
Thank you, Leader, very much. I was going to do a bit of a speak later on in the agenda. I don't know if you want me to leave it till then or do it a little bit now.
Well, I think as Councillor Goss has asked the question, I think it's probably fair enough to do it now if you'd like to.
Right. Well, yes, Councillor Goss, I do agree with you. I do want to see it in-house, but I do not want to jump too quick, because if we do this, we must do it properly the first time, because there will be no second time. And I don't want things to be repeated like we had this year. I feel that we could get comments like, well, you thought ID Verdi was bad, see what the council can do if we don't do it properly. And I think by giving us 3 years, it gives us the breathing space, and the officers, and I thank them, have worked so hard on this to sort it out. If we have the 3 years, we have time to get the machinery that we need, to decide what sort. Would it be electric? Would it be hybrid? What sort would that be? To have a proper depot to put these places in. It also gives us time to think in a different way by using the community to see what they would like. Give them the opportunities for home composting, community gardens, etc. Things like that that we haven't actually looked at or explored, because it's always been outsourced and somebody else does it, don't they? But I want to make sure that it is done properly, the proper way. And if we have to take time in doing it, and I shared the policy panel's disappointment that we couldn't just say, right, okay, as of next week, everything is in, because it wouldn't work that way. But we are working towards it. And we need the time to do it. But thank you anyway.
Thank you, Councillor Oxford. Very comprehensive answer there. Thank you, Councillor Goss. I made sure you got the answer to your question. I'm sure you're going to stay till the end anyway, but it does mean that you've got your answer early on. So I hope that suffices. Thank you. Thank you very much. That concludes the general have your say. So we'll move on to the main agenda. And the next one is decisions reviewed by the scrutiny panel. Do we have any decisions reviewed?
There are none, Chairman.
There are none. That's a good item. We like that one. So we'll move on to item 7, which is economy, business and heritage. We do have 2 speakers on item 7.1, but what I propose to do is allow or ask Councillor Laws to introduce the item, and then we'll let the 2 councillors who wish to speak come in.
Thank you, Leader. The town deal is nearly £20 million of external monies that Colchester wouldn't have otherwise had. So it would be churlish to refuse the opportunity to take that. That money is also going to leverage other significant pots of money that will make a material difference to Colchester. I'm particularly excited and pleased to note that spades will be going into the ground at the end of April around St Nicholas Square, a public realm square that's been talked about since the 1960s, finally happening, and hopefully ready in a few weeks after that in September time. Jumbo is going to be phenomenal, a real asset to complement the amazing Mercury Theatre and Colchester Arts Centre just inside the Roman city or town or city walls. I'm really pleased to be associated with it all, and I'm not going to talk any more about it. I think it's going to be a really good piece of regeneration for Colchester.
Thank you. So has Councillor G. Oxford managed to join us yet?
No, he hasn't.
Can't see that he has. So Councillor J. Young, I can see you are with us. So you're welcome. Good evening to you.
Hi, thank you very much, Leader. Good evening to fellow councillors. I'd also like to pay tribute to the work of Councillor Nick Cope. I think we were all pretty shell-shocked by the news this week. He served his community with distinction and was always, a good colleague to work alongside in our various committees. And it seems incredibly sad to think that we were all together a few weeks ago at the full council meeting, budget setting, and I spoke to Nick on that occasion. So very sad to hear that he's passed away. My question is on the town deal. I've got 2 questions. I've got one on the town deal and then one on the cultural strategy, which I guess I'll come to in a moment. Relating to the Heart of Greenstone project, you and I sit on the board, Leader, and we know how difficult it's been to engage community residents getting involved in this project. And you have it as one of your red risks on the project in terms of community engagement, not getting involved and not liking the scheme. There is concern in the community, but they're not coming forward to actually engage in the way we would want them to do. So I think, I would ask you as a cabinet to consider the resources you are allocating to that engagement process and to appeal to you to consider how we can strengthen that engagement. Because I don't think, leaving a pile of surveys in the community centre with nobody actually driving that forward is actually going to get the results that we need. I mean, whenever I go into the cafe, I hand them out and ask people to fill them in, which is what I did today. But there needs to be much more on the ground work in terms of community engagement.
Thank you. That's really, really useful feedback. I've said, and I think we're both quite united on this, that the project will only work if the community feels part of it. And I'm obviously concerned to hear about that. So that is something I will most certainly pick up with officers as to exactly what has been going on, because I understood from the meetings we've been to that the consultation was going to be far more proactive than leaving a few surveys lying around. So I'm concerned to hear about that, and I will certainly pick up with that immediately. What I'll do, yeah, I know you said you had another question on the cultural strategy, but if that's okay with you, we'll wait till that item comes up. Thank you very much. Thank you. So what I might just do is thank you to Councillor Laws for introducing this item. I might just see if portfolio holders perhaps want to talk a little bit about some of the things which they think cover up their portfolio or cover up their portfolio. It's been quite a long journey on this. I think, as I said at full council, I remember a bunch of people turning up in the grand jury room, which I think Councillor King had organised, where we all sat there sort of staring at one another thinking, my goodness, what's this, what we're going to do with it. So to actually get it down to this stage where we've got these business cases which go into quite extraordinary detail actually, together, and are about to put the final submission in, which hopefully should mean the money flowing probably quite soon in some cases, is a big achievement. And I would really like to thank the wide range of people who have been involved with it. And it is a wide range because this isn't a Colchester Borough Council project as such. It's had a great deal of enthusiastic support and work across Colchester. We've all got our favourite schemes out of it, all the things we really like and all the things which perhaps we think, well, yeah, it's all right, but we're not so keen on. But that's the nature of a collaborative process. The only way you get everything you want is if it's one person taking the decisions. Well, this wasn't one person or one body or one council taking the decision. So there is an inevitable compromise. And I take the view, well, if you're happy, if some people are happy with some things, but you're not that happy about the others, or less happy, I should say, then it's actually probably been quite a good collaborative effort. So it's not £20 million, of course. It's a lot more than that, because we can't just spend £20 million. We need to spend it very, very wisely and leverage a great deal of extra investment. And the hope is, where we spend £1 million, that doesn't just last for the next year. That brings, in many cases, 50 years of extra trade and extra investment and extra people, or more people into Colchester. So thank you to everybody concerned. So I'll yappered on for too long. I'll let other portfolio holders come in if they wished and want to mention any projects in their portfolios. Councillor Laws, was that an indication?
Go on then. I was just going to say that, you know, it's quite easy to get excited about things like Jumbo and Holy Trinity Church, and the tangible stuff to look at, but actually a large part of this is about helping with skills, which is an area that we care about, and there'll be more detail unveiled about that in our economic strategy. And it's also about some infrastructure, so forward funding, accelerated 5G and super fast broadband in an area of Colchester which is having renaissance eventually, I think. It's certainly got a cluster of businesses there, and it's going to go from strength to strength because we're putting in some infrastructure to support an environment that hopefully will work for the creative, tech and digital sector.
Thank you. Anybody else wish to comment? Councillor Harris?
Briefly, Chairman, just to say, actually, I'll pick up on Councillor Julie Young's comments as well regarding consultation, because I think you know how keen I am to get communities involved with consultation. It's something that I attended that first meeting, I think, Julie, when you were there, and said this is only going to work if the community buys into it. So I'm very happy to pick that up as well with officers and with you, Paul. And just to say, you're absolutely right. It's about leveraging more money, and you can see that this has already leveraged another 2.3 million. I think officers managed to bring in from Department of for Levelling Up and Communities, which is fantastic. And we are bidding for another £5 million from Homes England for it. Homes England have been extraordinarily generous through hard work of our officers, actually. I said it at scrutiny. Ruth Newcomb's already pulled in 1.7 million for affordable housing this year from Homes England. It's a really impressive, and we've got a very, very close relationship with them. now for generating more affordable housing in the borough. So really pleased with that. So all I can say is I'm really supportive of the project, but I understand there are issues with getting community buy-in, and it's vital that we do get that community buy-in. So we need to work harder on that part of it.
Thank you. I should point out, of course, that one project from this has already been completed, which is the new public round by Balcombe Gate, which is looking really, really good. I know the Mercury's quite pleased with it, I hope. St Nicholas Square, just over the road, that is, we hope, going to start next month. And I think we'll really regenerate that area. We've got some good new businesses around there as well. And I think that will become a really vibrant part of the town centre. It's really good to see things like Jumbo and Holy Trinity Church, which have been neglected for some time for whatever reason, to finally see something positive happen with them. It's not just a means to an end, though, because obviously Holy Trinity Church hopefully will be a really fabulous new home for C360 down the line. So there's more good news there. It's good to see the investment in the youth services, particularly the much needed refurb of the townhouse, which is actually a really good facility. It's just a bit dated. I don't think we should underestimate it. And with things like the very, very fast broadband, obviously the idea is that it attracts businesses who need that into Colchester. So it is about long-term investment, and it is about new employment opportunities, new business opportunities as well. So yeah, I think it's really, really good news. I think Councillor Oxford, again, hiding behind the camera there. I'm sorry I missed you earlier.
That's all right. I like hiding. I can't find the page where it was on now, but there is the investment in CCTV going ahead, which will also have a knock-on effect on making people feel safer in the night time, because there's going to be new CCTV cameras put in various places, but I can't find it on the page where I did find it last time. So I think investment in the CCTV, if anybody's ever been in the CCTV centre, it's absolutely amazing. And I would encourage all councillors to go in and have a look, because what they can do and how they can do it is fascinating. I could spend all day just watching people wandering around the town centre and how they find people and locate people that people have lost or they thought they were missing, and they can actually follow them around the town centre to see exactly where they're going. When I think it's a wonderful investment, and also something I've been working on for quite a while is the investment we're putting into Lexton Lake to try to get the fountain. Although I'm hitting problems with suppliers, but to get rid of try to get rid of our great friend, the duckweed, by installing a fountain in the lake in Lexton Park. I think that's a very good investment, and it will make the area look a lot better and clean it up a bit. And the residents, is something they've been working for and wanting for a long time. And now we're doing something to actually achieve that aim. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Oxford. So I think, without further ado, we'll move to the Mr. Weavers, what have we done wrong?
Sorry, Leader, I need to draw your attention to the 4 recommendations that you've got from the scrutiny panel, perhaps before you make your decision on the main report, on page 161 of your agenda.
I'm on page 24, so I've got a way to go. Hang on. Thank you. I knew there was something else. Well, I shall read out the recommendations from the scrutiny panel just for clarity, so we know what we're discussing. Recommended to Cabinet that Cabinet urge all group leaders to encourage their group members to watch the presentation on the town deal business cases as given at this meeting, which is at the scrutiny one. Well, I personally think that's a good recommendation. Are we agreed to accept that? We are. Good. B, Cabinet gives attention and provides assurance to show that officers and Cabinet have carried out due diligence and sufficient work to ensure the viability of each business case prior to their approval. I am confident that they have, and I'm also reassured by our section 151 officers' approval that we have, but I think it's a fair and decent recommendation, and I think it's good to put it there in clear writing. So I'm minded to accept that if others are in agreement. I see everybody agreeing. And C, community buy-in be fostered as fully as possible, such as by encouraging volunteering by members of affected communities where possible to insist in the delivery of town deal projects. I think that's a very good statement. Are we minded to accept that? No, Councillor Lissimore.
I most certainly am, but it's saying encourage volunteering by members of affected communities where possible to assist in the delivery. Doesn't quite say in what format and how that is actually doable. So I'm just a little bit concerned about the detail of that, but I certainly agree with its intention.
Would it perhaps be better if we said something like just participate in town deal projects? I don't know. I get the intention of the recommendation and I do understand it, but yeah. To insist in the delivery of.
Does Mr. Weavers have any recommendations on the wording? Put him on the spot.
No, Chairman, not at this point.
Thank you, Miss. The Chief Executive does, though.
Chair, certainly we were at the scrutiny panel and presented the town deal business cases, and I think it was a very good point that was made, which was actually during COVID, we saw a significant upswell from the community to try and help people in the community. And I think the point that was made was it would be really nice to try and engage more people who would like to volunteer in the different projects. And I think it takes different forms depending upon the projects. And that was, I think, the point that was being made by one of the scrutiny panel members. And actually that, for me, I thought was a really good point. You know, it's not just about the borough council or the county council or somebody else doing these town deal projects. It was actually saying, can we engage volunteers who would like to do one of a variety of the projects that are in the town deal itself? So I don't know how one captures that in a set of words, but that was the intention. And I think that was a really good outcome from the scrutiny panel, Chair.
Yeah, I mean, I personally, I do get what Councillor Lismore was saying, but I don't have a particular issue with the wording. Yeah, we could probably come up with a different set of words. We could spend half an hour coming up with a different set of words, which would probably mean much the same thing. So I'm minded just to accept it as it is, unless there's anybody vehemently disagreeing. Councillor Harris, are you vehemently disagreeing?
I'm not vehemently disagreeing, but actually communities can is something that we're really keen on. And we've talked about that all year. And actually, I think it's a really good point that has been brought up. And I do understand that there might be an issue with the wording, but I think we all understand exactly what the intention of this is. So I'm perfectly happy to support it.
Thank you. I think we're agreed on that. Good. And D, Cabinet notes the view of scrutiny panel at the Town House should be seen as for use by all young people in the borough, not just members of specific groups, clubs and societies, and that open access to youth services and adult learning opportunities be a commitment of the council. I do agree with that. I think we do have to recognise that the town deal money, we are restricted to capital investment. In other words, buying things and building them. We can't spend it on revenue expenditure. And and as Councillor Oxford was talking about earlier, I think particularly around the youth services, I think we do recognise perhaps it's not ideal in the sense that there isn't perhaps the access to what we would perhaps call a general youth club in some of these places as we would like. However, that's probably not a reason to turn down the capital investment, because I think the better the facilities, the better the buildings, the more things that more modern they are, the more likely or the more viable something becomes. It also potentially opens up other funding opportunities. If you read the Levelling Up agenda paper, there's a lot in there about potential access to money for youth services. And I think if we've got really good facilities, we're more likely to be able to attract extra funding. So I think we have to take a sort of build it and they will come approach to this. And, you know, I'm certainly £1 million going into the townhouse should be celebrated, but I'm quite happy with the recommendation, I think. Does anybody else have any other views? No, so that's kept it simple. So we have accepted those 4 recommendations, and I shall scroll all the way back to page 26. And get the actual recommended decision, which, sorry, bear with me. You see, this is where digital agendas do sometimes fall down. Let me just, could somebody remind me what page the recommended decision's on, please? Okay. Executive summary.
Do you want me to read them out, Chairman?
I think, oh dear. I've got it. Right, recommended decision, everybody. It is the Cabinet, or it is recommended the Cabinet, A, confirms Colchester Borough Council's ongoing commitment to the Town Deal programme in the role of accountable body. B, notes the findings of the Section 151 Officers' Internal Assurance Process for the Town Deal business cases. C, approves the Town Deal business cases and the summary documents. And D, approves as the accountable body the summary documents being submitted to government on behalf of the independent We Are Colchester board. I will just add, being an extremely boring person, I have actually read all the business cases and they are tremendously well done. So I'd just like to say a huge thanks to all the officers who contributed to put those together. Cabinet, that's the recommended decision. Are we in agreement? We are agreed. That is unanimous. Thank you very much. So, we'll move on to 7.2. We have one councillor speaking on this. I think what I would suggest, I know Councillor J. Young said she had a question, so I think we'll go to her first, so her question can be picked up in the presentation. So, Councillor J. Young.
Thanks very much again, Leader. I just wanted to preface my question by making a few comments about the strategy. I'm delighted to see the finished result. It's something that I was really keen to see happen when I was the portfolio holder for culture, and I see that Lucy is in attendance this evening, and I think Claire's in the audience as well, and I'm not sure Frank is there, but we have really first-rate officers that support our journey in terms of culture, and I pay tribute to them this evening, and also to Counterculture, who have done a fantastic job with this cultural strategy. It captures what is good, and we have a lot to celebrate in terms of our cultural offer here in Colchester, but it also gives us a roadmap of the future. And I guess my question to the portfolio holder is whether he and what his priorities will be going forward in terms of priorities, because we've got a lot in there. What jumps out of me, and I'm sure others, is the attention to deprivation and access and the needs that people have to come together for, I picked up entertainment, happiness and socialising, which are all really important. Please, no off-the-wall ideas like gin bars. That doesn't form part of the cultural strategy. And with a cultural lead, please commit to taking forward the ideas in the cultural strategy and using that to shape his ideas going forward.
Thank you, Councillor J. Young. Just as an aside, we had somebody in the town hall earlier, and they had a desk booked, and they asked where was the desk booked, and they were told you've got desk one in the gin bar. And for a moment they looked incredibly excited, but were very disappointed when they found out that wasn't quite what it was. But some good points there. I think what I'll do is hand over for this entire item to Councillor Laws, who I know will invite the presentation as well.
Thank you, Leader. To briefly touch upon the question from Councillor Young, my priorities are to see a borough that is inclusive and accessible, that is proactive in reaching areas that perhaps don't participate. One of the questions that I put to First Sight, Colchester Arts Centre and the Mercury in my one-to-one sessions with them was, are you proactively working in the postcodes where you don't have footfall or lower footfall? And the answer to that was yes, and that gives me comfort. for me, and I think we're on the same page here, getting people past the threshold is the first step. And as we've seen in First Sight, if giving people a warm meal in a school holiday gets people past the threshold and gets them engaged with art, then that's a good thing. I think also we have now an understanding within the cultural institutions and actually the wider realm that, you know, this stuff doesn't just happen inside buildings. It can happen everywhere. We see it happening nationally in London with the hoardings outside the galleries to entice you in. You'll see a print on the outside of what you can go and see on the inside. And I think that more events and cultural events within urban conurbations make for a more exciting, vibrant town centre or city centre, which is only going to be a good thing in the face of changing urban centres. So I'll introduce the item, and I know we're eager to see the presentation, so apologies, I'm not quite the warm-up act that will follow. But look, we've enlisted the assistance of one of the country's most reputable consultants in this field. So that's a great thing, because these guys will have experience dealing with similar-sized conurbations, so that's good. This is a 10-year cultural strategy. This has been a really good opportunity to engage with people that are working within the sector and outside of the sector. And I know that, you know, hundreds of people have been spoken to, hundreds of hours of time of actually a lot of listening. I mean, I know that I talked for quite a long time when I got that opportunity, quite a lot of listening to what people are saying about the cultural offering in Colchester, what we've got, what's great, and where we need to go and how we can make improvements. Some people out there will say, you know, well, culture and art should sort of stand on its own 2 feet. Some people will say we need to spend more on art or more on heritage. And I think in the end, you know, there's a balance. And ultimately, you know, everyone in the borough of Colchester has the right to take their children or to be that child and go and see the panto. And what an amazing panto we have in the regional powerhouse that is the Mercury Theatre. We've got about 4,000 people in the borough that are working in this sector, and it's growing. As I've touched on and say many times, town centres have changed. We are going to be successful or not in the future and in the long run, I think largely dependent on our cultural offering, and that is the heritage and the arts and all that the culture is. Why have a cultural strategy? Well, it's been a great chance to self-evaluate, to look at what's great. And actually, if you compare where we are now compared to 10, 15 years ago, I think you can see a really positive trajectory. We're going in a really, really exciting place. And Colchester punches above our weight. The Department for Culture, Media and Sport even recognised that. We are becoming a regional centre for culture. Long may that continue. And as I do bang the drum, we have this amazing, unique opportunity in our Roman heritage. That is what's going to bring a lot of people here. And if you're coming to Colchester to see something Roman, and then you pop into an art gallery or see a show in the Mercury or the Art Centre and stay in a hotel and eat in a restaurant and spend money in a local shop, that is a good thing. So I'm really proud of this work. I pay tribute to the officers to Visit Colchester, to the Art Centre, to First Sight, to the Mercury, to the freelancers, to the employed, to ordinary, we're all extraordinary, by the way, Colchester residents who've participated in this. And I hope you'll be as impressed as I am with what's about to follow. Over to you.
Thank you, Councillor Laws. Thank you for entrusting this important piece of work to my firm, Counterculture. I'm from Colchester, so it's a particular honour for me to be selected to do this piece of work. It was a joint piece of work with a project team including Colchester Borough Council, Counterculture, my firm, the Mercury, the Art Centre, First Sight, and the wider creative sector across Colchester. This work took a very broad view of culture, this being all things that people do in their spare time, including arts, heritage, sports, hobbies, digital activities, and all of these things affecting the economy, health, well-being, tourism, the environment, planning in the built environment, education skills, and many other areas of life and public policy. So one of the key contexts for this strategy was Colchester Borough Council, as with other local authorities across the country, not being expected in every context to deliver everything culturally and not to be responsible for everything culturally. and the cultural sector in Colchester itself taking more responsibility for itself and making culture in the borough more than the sum of its parts by collaborating better and leveraging more money, external funding from outside of Colchester. And this is a challenge. In the course of the work, it was clear that the cultural sector here wanted to meet and wanted to deliver. Next slide, please. Thank you. We did extensive feedback. We spoke to over 1,000 people through various means, many through a survey. We also did one-to-one face-to-face interviews with key stakeholders. And we had a public event at the Mercury Theatre where 200 people attended. And I must say I was struck in the course of this work, and my colleagues as well, by the relative positivity and constructive views that people had about culture within the borough. And we've worked in across many parts of the country, and that's not always the case. So there was a very, very positive underpinning for the work, that people understood that there'd been investment here in infrastructure. There were requests inevitably for more things, but it was relatively restrained and from an understanding of that the provision here is strong, and that was a very encouraging start to the work. Next slide, please. Now, he's gone to the Mercury Theatre to watch the show tonight, but Dr. Anthony Roberts from the Arts Centre was here to speak earlier, but we can now hear him speak. This is only 20 seconds long, but this is Anthony's the piece that we did for the internet to encourage people to fill out a survey about culture, and this was very successful. Hundreds and hundreds of people clicked through and did in fact fill out that survey. If we could just hear that now, please. If that's stuck, don't worry. I think many of you have seen it before, so we can move over that. Sorry about that, but it did work, and oh, there we go. Except we don't get to hear Anthony now. There we go. Simple, but it was effective in getting people to give their views. Next slide, please. As well as doing the cultural strategy, we did a separate piece of work as part of the same commission to map all the cultural infrastructure across the borough. And of course, there is a major cluster around the town centre, and that presents certain issues. But we were surprised by the amount of activity that happens outside of the town centre, and that there is a detailed piece of work of that's separate to that. But I just want to show you a sample of the work we did there. Next slide, please. So we worked on these 4 themes: collaboration and cultural identity, access and relevance, talent development, and growth and resilience. And all of the actions within the cultural strategy fall within one of those themes. I'm going to talk about 3 of them, and Steve Mannix from the Mercury Theatre is going to talk about talent development when we get onto that. Next slide, please. So collaboration and cultural identity. One of the main issues that we encountered that I mentioned earlier is cultures having such strong assets in arts and heritage across the borough. But further collaboration between the existing organisations that are here and making it more than the sum of the parts and punching even more above its weight being a priority. So we focus a lot of our work and recommendations and actions around those areas, because working better together would ensure economies of scale particularly between the MPO organisations, the Arts Centre, the Mercury Theatre and First Sight and the Museum Service. It would also promote the sharing of best practice. So if one of those organisations does something particularly well, why can't that practice be shared more equally across all of them? And also the issue of placemaking, making Colchester a better place to live and visit through joint efforts. Next slide, please. Access and relevance really focused on more participation from a wider range of people. So with the new infrastructure and with the Mercury and First Sight a few years ago and what's happening now with the town deal, needing to animate that infrastructure. So in order to sustain the improvements that have been made, needing artistic practice and cultural activity to happen in those spaces to ensure their long-term survival and that they thrive. Also, within access and relevance, some work on the positive impact on health and well-being that culture brings. So for the next slide, I'm going to hand over to Steve to talk about the actions that we took around talent development.
Good evening, everybody. One of the cross-cutting themes that we've worked on for the cultural strategy is the place of young people. And I think that's particularly pertainable to the item you were discussing before, is where young people can become engaged in where they live and feel proud about where they live. And culture can offer that as a gateway, as an opportunity. And similarly, it can be an opportunity for consultation, to get feedback immediately from young people through using culture. And also looking at skills for young people. So one of the things we've started to look at is a shared apprenticeship scheme across each of the organisations, and to get the best out of government schemes. So, for example, many of you are aware at the Mercury we took on 12 young people on the government's Kickstart scheme, of which we've just been proud to give 7 young people, local young unemployed people, jobs in the sector. So actually that model can be replicated right across each of the MPOs, but similarly that can be replicated across any other events or anything else within the hospitality industry. And those skills are also portable, that they can keep those with them for life. And also where they're looking at the moment, opportunities around volunteering. How do we bring people back into the workplace that have maybe been excluded for a while, and that they could build up a skills portfolio in order to facilitate and enable them to get a job. And part of the levelling up agenda, that does come through in terms of skills and placemaking being particularly important there. And similarly, how then we, as, if you like, the subsidised sector, I mean, not greatly subsidised, but subsidised nonetheless, can work with the more commercial sector within town, and how their footfall, etc., is being able to benefit the inward investment and obviously the local economy, and as Councillor Laws was just mentioning, potential visitor spend, tourism and overnight stays. So that just gives you a real glimpse into the talent development opportunities I think that this cultural strategy offers us.
Thank you, Steve. Next slide, please. So growth and resilience. Culture is a real economic driver. That many economic impact assessments all over the country show that for every pound invested of public funds, culture returns 5 times and more times of an economic return. It affects tourism, it generates jobs, they drive other businesses within the commercial sector. So, you know, many benefits from the organisations working more together, leveraging more external funding. There's a national portfolio organisation round for the Arts Council coming up very soon. The Arts Council stressed as part of the consultation we did with them that they wanted to see Colchester's organisations working more closely together, and that's a key theme that comes through in the growth and resilience part of the work, as well as in the collaboration part. That's the end of the presentation. I welcome any questions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. That was really great. A couple of questions, if you don't mind, and I deliberately haven't teed you up with this, so I know that it will be an honest account. You talked about how there is a drive towards sharing and being a bit more efficient behind the scenes. Could you give us a bit of meat on the bones in terms of what that could look like? Because obviously there might be a fear that means, well, hang on a minute here, we could actually save some money by cutting some jobs and duplication, but I don't think that's the case. So some meat on the bones on that would be good. And perhaps with your national experience, you could give us an insight into where you think really Colchester is at for the size of a community that we are. And you touched on it and said that there's a lot of positivity here, but any more meat on the bones in terms of the national context might be useful. And then any other cabinet members?
Certainly, thank you. On the question of collaboration, I think there are more opportunities in sharing best practice than there are in economies of scale in the short term. I think that perhaps over the longer term there could be more economies of scale as the situation develops. So if for example, someone within one of the MPOs, that there was a restructure of a department or something, that would be an opportunity to say, well, actually, could we do this differently and could we do this collaboratively? But I think that's a medium and longer term process. I think in the meantime, it's things like that, the things that they all do equality training, they all do, they all have digital infrastructure. What aspects of these could be done better together? And there will, of course, be an economic premium if they're done together, but more importantly, they'll do a better job of it. And I think that's the priority that we've tried to stress within this, but always looking for those opportunities in the longer term to not to duplicate effort unnecessarily and not to do things less well than their peers do on the other side of the town centre. That was the emphasis. And the second question about where Colchester sits, I mean, you really are unusually positioned in terms of the assets that you have, both in terms of the heritage, which, as you all know, covers a great swathe of time, important parts of heritage, not, of course, the Roman time, council laws, but much else besides, as you know, but also in terms of arts MPOs. I mean, if you even just comparing with local authorities in Essex and Suffolk and other nearby counties, you have a disproportionately strong collection of cultural leadership and really high quality, international quality things to do, which it does say it is unusual. So I think one of the first challenge is to hold on to the external investment you've got already. And secondly, that further external investment that's leveraged from your activities really comes from innovating and working better together and being more of an exemplar. And that will bring further funds through that. And I don't know if Steve has anything to add to that.
Yeah, I think there's a whole swathe of work where we are looking at a local cultural education partnership at the moment, bringing all the organisations together with schools, both across the age range, and how we might then provide an offer back to those schools. We're aware of the national curriculum, creative subjects being squeezed out, but also the additionality that we as a sector can offer to things like after school clubs and ourselves, say at the Mercury, and the work that we do with Essex Short Breaks in terms of support for young disabled people, their parents and their carers. So there are direct health and well-being events, benefits, as you're aware, the first site. So it's about us being able to work in collaboration and partnership. We're aware of limited resources, but actually it's making those resources work smarter and harder for all of us, both at county and at borough level.
Thank you all. I'll just say very briefly that Tom, it's good to see you in person because I think we've met on Zoom in the past, so it's great to see you here. I think Councillor Harris indicated to speak. Is that right?
Maybe I did, Chairman. I'm happy to do so. I would say it's really interesting actually hearing Tom's commentary, disproportionately strong in cultural leadership, I think is what you said. We had a recommendation, I think, from Scrutiny to go and have a look at the business case being presented on the town deal being presented to Scrutiny, was it the Scrutiny panel? I would suggest that people go back and have a look at the arts and culture bodies. So it was the Mercury Theatre. So it was Steve Manick, Sally Shaw from First Sight, and Anthony Roberts from the Colchester Arts Centre being scrutinised on the 22nd, I think it was, of this month. Because I think it was I'm not going to say it was the most extraordinary piece of scrutiny, because I don't think they were given any sort of, well, they didn't need to be given a hard time. It was just a really uplifting and fascinating insight to what we've got, the offer that we've got in Colchester. Sort of more than I realised. That, I mean, you're doing more even than I had realised. And when I read this paper, it is just extraordinary how strong we are in Colchester. I was thrilled, I have to say, on the apprenticeship thing. I found that really interesting. Steve, when you talked about that at scrutiny, the fact that you're going to have people who are able to get a taste of all sorts of different jobs effectively within the sector. I hope some of them will be able to get jobs here, but it certainly gives them the opportunity to know where their niche is in life and whether they enjoy it and build up those skills for them. So a portfolio of skills, I think you called it, which is fantastic. The recommendation is for us to endorse the cultural strategy for Colchester, Chairman. I certainly endorse it, having read this paper. I'm thrilled that we've actually got an action plan at the end of it. It's not just a piece of work to pat ourselves on the back and say this is how fantastic Colchester is. Actually, there's an action plan with how we're going to continue delivering on that and building on that. So really pleased with it, and thank you very much indeed to a lot of people for a lot of very hard work. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll certainly endorse the comments about the scrutiny presentation. I was there. I won't mention the piece of public art, which caused a little bit of amusement. I'll also just mention Essex County Council, because we were talking about them earlier, perhaps, and criticising them a bit over bollards and various things. But somebody who shall remain nameless was talking to me not that long ago and said to me, people often ask me what the Essex cultural strategy is. Well, as far as I can work it out, it's just bung it all in Colchester. Now, whether that's true or not, I don't know, and others may argue from elsewhere in the county, but nonetheless, we have got a lot in Colchester, and it really does make the place very special, I think. So all I can say is thank you, and thank you, Tom, for your excellent work on this. Is there anybody else wishing to say anything before we move to the decision? No? Okay. Well, the recommended decision, unless Mr. Weavers tells me we've got one from scrutiny I've missed, but I don't think I have, is short and sweet. It's to endorse the cultural strategy for Colchester as presented. So, Cabinet members, are we in agreement to endorse the cultural strategy? I think we are. It is endorsed. Thank you very much, and have a great evening. Thank you very much.
Sorry to just, Ant was going to mention this, that there's a benefit for Ukraine on the 27th of March at the Arts Centre, and then that's followed by us all the venues right the way across the borough having various different events to raise funds for Ukraine throughout April.
Fantastic. I'm sure that can be put in our diaries, so everybody remembers. Thank you. Thank you, Steve. That's thank you, Tom. That's fantastic. I am conscious of the hour, but I'm also conscious of the fact that we have a very extensive agenda. So we've gone past an hour and a half, but what I was going to propose is that we take the next item and then maybe have a short break, unless anybody disagrees. That seems to make sense. So we'll move on to item 8.1, which is resources. So I shall ask Councillor Lissimore to introduce this one.
Thank you very much. As per usual, but a big thank you to officers for all the work that they've done within this. This is our opportunity as a cabinet to put our little stamp on our administration and on this municipal year. We would like to do more, obviously, and we are doing more, but I think what we have here is a short list of some of the more prominent items that we felt were exceedingly important. I will ask my colleagues to speak on different issues, but just to raise a few. Obviously, as Councillor Oxford mentioned earlier, the Lexton Park Lake, it was important to do something to try and improve the water quality in that lake. This is not just for the residents of Lexton. This is a park that is visited by many people over the whole of the Colchester Borough and from outside. I know my children from when they were babies have visited the site. It's an incredibly prominent site, and we asked last year for some work to be done and we were refused. This year, we have put our money where our mouth is, and we are looking at a solution to the problem down there. I'll let Councillor Simon Crowe speak about the recycling containers, but this was something that I was particularly keen on because I always say, if we want residents to recycle, they have got to have the tools to do it. And quite often in the past, there have been situations where we've run out of garden waste bags. We've run out of kitchen caddies. That's not good enough. That's making it exceedingly difficult for residents to recycle. And we want to make it as easy as possible for them. So I felt it was very important to ensure that we had sufficient stock as much as possible so that residents can recycle to the optimum. Councillor Oxford also mentioned the CCTV camera deployment. Again, technology has improved so much that this is something that we can now invest in and ensure that certain grot spots that perhaps have not had access to CCTV cameras in the past can now have them. And they can be moved where the problems are. So these won't necessarily be cameras that will be fixed in particular places, never to be moved. They will be able to be moved as antisocial behaviour occurs, as fly tipping occurs, so that we have every opportunity to ensure our borough is as safe and clean and green as it possibly can be. I'd like to just add one thing with regard to the mosaics and Gosbeck's research project. I don't think anybody can underestimate what a little whirlwind Councillor Darius Laws is and how tenacious he has been in his time as a councillor over the heritage projects, the lighting of the walls, Balkan Gate, Jumbo, and now the mosaics and Gosbecks. I think we were all very, very excited when we saw on social media the mosaic that was unveiled within Lion Walk. How wonderful will that be to have that glassed over and have the opportunity to walk over it as you're doing your shopping. How absolutely fantastic. As a reminder, not just to visitors, but to all our residents, this is what we're built on. And this is Councillor Laws that has been pushing for this. And won't it be wonderful if in the future we can find more of these mosaics or relay mosaics we know we already have, and that they've become an integral part of our town so that every single person that's walking around our town or city centre knows that this is what we're made of. And that is all down to Councillor Laws. So I'd like to make a very, very personal thanks to him, because he has been so tenacious in all his time as a councillor. But I will pass this over now to other members of the Cabinet if they wish to speak on particular subjects.
Thank you, Councillor Lissamore. I'll just come in there. I'll certainly endorse your comments about Councillor Laws and say congratulations on the mosaic find. All I can recommend is that if you have a patio or a driveway, never jokingly say to Councillor Laws you think there might be a mosaic under it, because he will be around with a digger in the morning. But I don't know who wishes to go first. Darius, would you like to go first?
Thanks, Leader. Thanks, Councillor Lissamore. Very kind. So previously, Cabinet did approve a modest budget to enable us to uncover the Roman mosaic just off the High Street in Red Lion Yard. And in recent days, we've been successful in locating that. We knew roughly where it was, but it was a game of battleships. We got it in the end. And this Friday, I'll be meeting with architects, officers, and the Colchester Archaeological Trust to look very, very tangibly about how we can interpret that and basically get some tape measures out and work out, can we afford the glass? I think we probably can. This evening, though, we're talking about an additional request from me for £30,000 of taxpayers' money, broken into two parts. The first is £15,000 for further work on mosaics. And I'll be very brief on it, but just to say that we do have mosaics in storage. I think it was sometime in the 1970s when the Lion Walk shopping precinct was being redeveloped. A mosaic of an actual lion or a big cat was extracted from the ground, and we have that in storage. And so the request for the monies, Cabinet, is so that we can bring in a specialist to look at what we've got and to look at conserving and potentially interpreting, and yes, if possible, where it's easy, place some back. And there will be more to be found in Colchester as continuous urban regeneration happens. It is no longer acceptable for a developer to uncover a Roman mosaic in Colchester and think, do you know what, we're going to pour sand and concrete on it and leave it for the next generation. The time is now. We need our town centre to shine with its unique heritage now. And I'm putting that marker in the ground. So that's what the £15,000 is for. The further £15,000 is for Gosbecks. Now, I've been talking about Gosbecks for a while. We've all been talking about Gosbecks since the late 1990s when the archaeological park was conceived. The reality is none of us would be here in this room tonight if it wasn't for that very site. That's how significant it is. It's not just a Colchester significant site, it's a nationally and possibly even internationally significant site. The £15,000 is not going to enable me to put up a massive sign or a statue and stand next to it and get photographed for some local election campaign, because that frankly would be irresponsible and pointless and do a disservice to the bigger opportunity that we've got there. So my thinking, well, the thinking is with our excellent officers on this, that we're going to collaborate with a university, the University of Durham, who have an Iron Age specialist academic. We're going to collaborate with them. They are going to conduct a 150-acre geophysics survey of the land around the archaeological park, which has never been done before, by the way. Then the following year, in 2023, we will do a survey of the park itself. Then there will potentially be excavations with students, young academics, and community engagement from people in Colchester to find what we've got there. There are going to be secrets there. It's going to be fascinating. And on the back of all of that, and with that kind of academic rigor to it, we should be in a really strong position to go to Historic England and other partners and potential funding partners to create an archaeological visitor centre there. Because at the moment, I could ask the leader really nicely if he'd let me have a toilet block there, which would be great for the dog walkers, but it wouldn't be enough, and it would be a disservice to the long-term opportunity that we've got there. So that's the direction we're going in. It's £15,000. You won't see a lot tangibly for a while, but the rigor of the academic results that are going to come out of it are going to enable us to take it forward in the long run and in our lifetimes, hopefully. So we all get to see something significant there. I think it has the potential to be Colchester's Sutton Hoo. I really do. And again, that will bring people here spending money in our town.
Thank you, Councillor Laws. Anybody else wish to speak? Councillor Ellis, I think.
I will, because there are things against my portfolio in here, Chairman. I can't really follow Councillor Laws because he speaks with such passion about everything, but hey, I'll try. Can I be passionate about planning enforcement? I think I probably can, actually. I said it at scrutiny. A strong planning enforcement team is actually the bedrock of a strong development management team. And one of the first things I did when I became portfolio holder was to request some additional budget. I think we had that meeting, I think it was our first meeting actually, to adjust some additional budget for funding an additional part-time enforcement officer, because we had one who was working part-time but was about to leave us. And I'm delighted that officers and colleagues recognise that. We carried on with that employment. He has been fantastic, really helpful, because it means you've got 3 of them. They're working incredibly hard. They've got a lot of cases. And I'm thrilled that colleagues are prepared to continue funding that person. There are some other figures in here, which, whilst they're not set against the new homes bonus, are actually quite important. And because I think we wanted to be quite transparent about where we're spending taxpayers' money, I thought I would just highlight some of them. The £10,000 additional apprentice funding actually gives me an opportunity to point out what a tremendous success the apprentice scheme has been within the planning department. Taking on that apprentice has been brilliant. It wasn't actually, it had some criticism when we decided to do this, but it wasn't a young person either that applied. It was someone who was sort of thought they'd like to change careers. They've done so well, we're now taking them on in a permanent post, and we are creating another apprentice post within the planning department, so that we can bring someone else on in the same way. So we're growing our skills in-house, which I think is really important. As I was saying with the apprentice scheme on the cultural thing, I just think it's fantastic that we're giving opportunities to young and older people to progress and get jobs within Colchester. £140,000 for developing local design codes seems quite a lot of money, but I think it needs some explaining. It says in the papers, I think it says, if I go back and have a look, it says developing local design codes to build beautiful, which doesn't really explain the extent of what we're trying to do. I have actually got some notes for this one because I think it is important, Chairman. They're an amalgam of mine and a senior planner's, but I will just go through them. It says, the government, in response to the Building Better, Building Beautiful Commission report, Living with Beauty in January 2020, and the government's response on January the 21st, the government delivered, allied to the NPPF, a national design guide and an allied national design code to provide more detailed yet generic, important that, guidance on design. The NPPF has been refocused on design as a key element in enhancing outcomes for communities. Paragraph 1 to 8 states, to provide maximum clarity about design expectations at an early stage, all local planning authorities should prepare design guides or codes consistent with the principles set out in the National Design Guide and National Model Design Code, and which reflect local character and design preferences. Design guides and codes provide a local framework for creating beautiful and distinctive places with a consistent and high quality standard of design. Their geographic coverage, level of detail and degree of prescription should be tailored to the circumstances and scale of change in each place and should allow a suitable degree of variety. I'll go on. We need to respond positively to this challenge to banish generic and mediocre design and to involve our communities in formulating design codes to allow us to be proactive in directing the design conversation based on local distinctiveness and the identity of the borough and its distinctive built heritage. It's really important to me that we spend this £140,000 in this way. It's going to do precisely that. It's our opportunity to say goodbye to homogenous identikit housing that we're, unfortunately, I see an awful lot of in Colchester. Partially, it's, I think, and I said this at scrutiny, it's partially due to the success of the Essex Design Guide, actually, that it seems to have been adopted almost countrywide. But I see the same homes almost wherever I go, which is incredibly disappointing. Colchester does have a number of distinct character areas, and these codes won't be one code for the whole of Colchester, but it will be codes for different parts of Colchester, and it will involve communities in getting involved in coming up with those design codes, so they feel that actually they're getting something which fits with the identity of their community and is not just a homogenous identikit home built because developers happen to own the people that make the bricks and the people that make the tiles, and they use house type 3A or 2B or what have you. Colchester deserves better than that, and this is our opportunity to make that happen, and we will make that happen. At scrutiny, the chairman said that he'd like to see some environmental codes within standards within our codes. I've spoken to officers, and I can confirm with him tonight that yes, we can include some environmental standards within those codes. So we have a Colchester standard, which I think is, again, really, really important. I think that'll do on that one. And I've also we've got 100,000 set against master planning. It says contribution to joint master planning in the town centre with Essex County Council. I think you will probably want to say a little bit about this yourself, Chairman, but when you asked me to become a portfolio holder, I was a little bit, I've got an awful lot on and I don't know if I've got the time to commit to it. And you said to me, if you don't take it up, you will really regret it, because you've been banging on for years about the town centre, master planning it, doing something far, far better than we have at the moment, because we seem to be doing everything in a piecemeal way. And on that basis, I said, actually, yes, I'd be mad to pass up that opportunity. Basically, it was the carrot that you dangled in front of me. I'm really proud of the things I've done as a councillor over the years I have been a councillor and for my communities. But I think if I and we were to leave any sort of legacy, I think master planning the town centre would be quite a fitting one. It's an opportunity. We saw in the not too distant past, Essex County Council came up with a design for what they wanted to do at the St Botolph's roundabout, which I think all of us thought wasn't very good, if we're honest. And I think they would now agree that it doesn't fit with what we really want to do in Colchester. And we felt now, especially I think working with, it was two Conservative authorities, the leader of Essex County Council happens to be my ward colleague and I know him very well, and we've talked about this for a long time and felt that if you're really going to make Colchester survive and thrive, you need to, as Councillor Laws and I discussed on many occasions, bring people back to live within the town centre, which is something that I'm really, really keen to do. And I've spoken to various organisations within the town centre who think that's definitely something we should be doing. And the other thing I want to do is I think we should be doing is making it far easier to move around our town and our borough. Which is why I think it's really important to get, we've been talking about this, to get an integrated transport hub. It makes abundant sense to me for that to be placed near Colchester Town Railway Station, because that has links to Colchester North Railway Station, and it will have links well beyond and into tendering and with the RTS and what have you, coming into St Botolph. So for me, working holistically across Colchester and working with our partners, certainly Partner Authority and Essex County Council, and with the communities in that area, I think this is our opportunity finally to put some real investment in. They're investing a large sum of money in a transport strategy for Colchester. They're investing a large sum of money in this master planning for Colchester, and we are having a series of meetings and lots of people will be involved as this progresses. But I think this is our opportunity to put a real stamp on Colchester. So I'm delighted that we're putting a budget to it. You may have more to say.
I don't think I can really follow that, Councillor Ellis. I think you got everything in there. I'll just pick up on the design codes. We have to think of it as a long-term investment. It's not a design code to last a year. It's a design code to last a very long time. And I think certainly if you listen to any of our planners will tell us that if we don't have one, we will have little influence over the look and the type of buildings being built in the coming decades. There's clearly an opportunity there to develop this under the NPFF. And I think if we don't take it, people would look back in 10 or 20 years' time at what's been built in Colchester subsequently and say, well, they really missed the boat on that. So I think it's very important we do. The Essex Design Code, I think, has probably run its course in many respects. And I think having a Colchester Design Code is a very good idea. But that's all I'm going to say. Is anybody else wish to? I think Councillor Crowe was next.
Okay, thank you, Chair. I'm really pleased that we've got £30,000 allocated so that we don't run out of recycling containers, which ensures residents can separate recyclable materials for collection by our waste and recycling crews and keep us as one of the top performing authorities in the region. And as Councillor Lissimore was saying, it's important that we give people the tools to recycle, otherwise they won't do it. So we'll keep up that good work. And it's also very pleasing to know that we've got £30,000 available for residents to tackle the dreaded duckweed problem and maintain water quality at Lexington Park Lake. And so that's very good news indeed. And I know it's been something that people have wanted for quite some time. And finally, We will be funding the Woodland and Biodiversity Project for a 4th year with a total of £136,000. This clearly demonstrates this administration continues to take the climate emergency that the council voted unanimously to declare in 2019 extremely seriously, and we are committed to the project's continuation. This money ensures that along with our partners, community groups and residents, we can continue to plant thousands of trees, create meadowlands and increase biodiversity throughout our borough, as well as beginning to restore some wetlands. This also provides a unique opportunity. This project provides a unique opportunity for everyone, no matter what their background, location, age, etc., to collaborate with others and create a legacy of a greener Colchester in the future and improve residents' health and well-being by enabling more access to green spaces whilst tackling the climate crisis. And it's been before I was portfolio holder, I had some knowledge of the Woodland and Biodiversity Project. It wasn't massively on my radar, so becoming responsible for it was a huge learning curve for me and a very enjoyable one. And it's been a real pleasure for me to be involved with influencing a project that's going to have so much impact on this town for years and years to come, generation after generation. Those trees, the vast majority of those trees we're planting, they will be there in years and years' time. So I'm very, very pleased to have been involved with it. And I will just say one thing, I can't let events in my ward go by without something said. Darius and his mosaic, I was rooting for you throughout those digs, and I would have been so disappointed if you hadn't found it. And I was so pleased when you finally did. And I can't wait for that sheet of glass over the top of it, so I can walk where I've been walking for decades and now actually see the mosaic that I've been walking over for years. That's a really exciting prospect, and it's so fantastic for this town that we're starting to get the vision to do projects like this and bring our history to life. It's quite something. And one quick word, Councillor Oxford mentioned the CCTV suite. I too had a visit there. They had to drag me out. It's just fascinating. Just all those images of the streets we know, and you could literally read what people are reading off their phones as they walk past the cameras. It's so sharp. So that's fantastic work that we're expanding that. Okay, so enough from me.
Thank you. I'll just add that if you go into the CCTV room and your opening gambit is, does it get Netflix? They've heard it before. Councillor Oxford.
Yes, Leader. Sorry, I got my items muddled up, and I spoke about the CCTV and Lexton Lake in the other item when it should have been in this one. So apologies for the bit of confusion there. I think I jumped the gun a bit.
That's all right. That was absolutely fine. But well, I think we've got, unless anybody else wishes to comment, Councillor Lissimore.
Just sort of sum up, really. I mean, as I say, I didn't mention the Woodland and Biodiversity Project at the beginning. It was very important for us when we came in as an administration to really take that project apart and put it back together with our stamp on it. What we wanted to make sure is that the trees that are planted are the right trees in the right area. We don't want to go for huge headline grabbing figures saying that we're planting 10,000, 20,000, 30,000. It doesn't matter if they die. It doesn't matter how many trees you plant. What matters is that we plant the right trees in the right areas for the environment, and that those trees survive for our children, for our grandchildren. So I know that we took the project apart really right at the beginning and put it back together on what we thought was the best way possible to ensure that this scheme survives, especially where volunteers are involved. I remember, and I'll be showing some of my age here, I planted a tree in 73, and every time I drive through my home village of Little Clacton, I can still see that tree. That's still there. That survived. What we don't want is for the volunteers to come along, help us plant these trees, and then for the children to say, "Mummy, let's go and see our tree," and they go there and it's dead. We don't want that. So it was very important that this project works and this project actually delivers the right trees in the right area. So I just wanted to just clarify on that. So Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lissimore. Councillor Ellis.
Yeah, just a tiny point, because I don't know if we've said thank you very much to Dan and Paul and Darren for their, and other officers actually, for their work on this. Maybe you did too, and I missed it. Actually, without them and their expertise, we have lists of wants and things that we'd like to achieve, but they're the people that help make that happen. So I just think it's important that we publicly do say thank you to them for making that happen. We're appreciative. Thank you.
Thank you. I think we have now. So thanks for that, Councillor Ellis, but very, very important point there. So unless anybody else wishes to say anything, the recommended decision is to approve the new homes bonus allocations set out in Appendix A. Do we agree that? We agree. That's unanimous. Thank you very much. Now, I'm conscious we've been going for 2 hours, 15 minutes. So are we okay with a 10-minute break rather than 15? Because we've got a lot on the agenda. So back here, please, at 8:25. Thank you. 1 minute, ladies and gentlemen. Take your seats, please. Thank you, everybody, and welcome back. We'll move swiftly on with the agenda with item 8.2, which again is resources, which I know we have a presentation on, but I'll hand over to Councillor Lissimore to introduce the item, please.
Thank you. I think we'll just go straight to the presentation.
I think we have Councillor Tate, Chair of CCHL, and Paul T. Smith, Chief Executive. Welcome. And we look forward to your presentation.
Apologies, I've just run up the stairs. There are a lot of them in this building. Okay, so the report introduces the business plan for Colchester Commercial Holdings Limited, which I'll refer to as CCHL. The plan has passed through the Governance and Audit Committee, who raised 8 questions for response. Paul Smith, the Managing Director of CCHL, is going to take you through those questions and how we've incorporated them into our response and into our plans. Excuse me. The plans have been agreed by the CCHL board, which, as I'm sure you're all aware, has got cross-party representation. Should have had more of a breath before I started this. The board and the management team are comfortable that we can deliver the plans that Paul is going to talk through with you. And so I'm now going to pass you over to Paul to present.
Thank you very much indeed. And good evening to you all. What I'm going to take you through is the 8 points that were raised at the Governance and Audit Committee, and they have been incorporated into the business plans, and those business plans were recirculated back to Governance and Audit. So the 8 points that I'm going to take you through are on page 263 of the report that's before the Cabinet. If I could have the next slide, please. Just want to take you through what we're going to be delivering this year ending the 31st of March. You can see that the full year budget there is the £111,000, 769, and we're currently forecasting to better that by delivering £150,000. Now moving on to the 8 points that were raised by the Governance and Audit. Next slide, please. So there's 2 questions here that have been answered in one response. What is the financial flexibility of CCHL to strengthen its balance sheet? That was quite a long conversation we had at G&A. And then we have the other questions, which is what are the unresolved financial risks and assumptions with regards to the potential impact of the minimum revenue provision on the 2 major projects required. So what we have done is that we have had discussions with the council. We've been looking at the medium-term financial plan, and it has been agreed that any retention of the dividends within the companies is not realistic. The financial pressures that are requiring on the medium-term financial plan for the council really does need all the dividends that are going to be available from our companies, from CCHL Group over the next 4 years, really does need to be paid into the council. So looking at alternative options that we have there for CCHL is looking at alternative funding sources, which we'll talk about in a later couple of slides, looking at joint venture opportunities and looking at partnerships. But the main crux is really waiting for the levelling up in housing and communities in their consultation with regard to
what they're going to be looking for in a minimum revenue provision. The minimum revenue provision is going to be on the investments that the council is making in the companies, predominantly in the energy company and in the housing company are the two main projects. And we are looking with great eagerness to actually see what the outcome is going to be from the levelling up in housing communities. The Section 151 officer has given you an update on that, and we are hoping that we're going to get some response in April of this year. Next slide, please. Next question was talking about the tax implications associated with our activity. And of course, the company making commercialized profits is eligible to pay corporation tax on that. But what we do, and one of the great benefits in the way that the companies have been set up, we've got two companies that have to be set up with investment, which is the homes and also the energy company. The trading company, which is a multifaceted company, is making the majority of the profits for the group at the present time. So we're utilizing group relief to make sure that we are maximizing the opportunities of dividend to the council by using group relief to make sure that we're not overpaying on a corporation tax. And it's very important to always remember that the transfers between the parties, the transfers of the activities between the council and the companies has always got to be at what is deemed to be market value. And we're always taking and watching very carefully with regard to those processes. Next slide, please. Two questions here. What are the additional activities could be envisaged in the business plan to ensure the profit making within CCHL? There are commercialized activities within the council, and indeed the council has set up what is called a transformation board, which is looking at how the council is going to be reacting as it comes through out of COVID, and also looking at how it's going to improve its income and expenses, and also what other commercial activities are there. So the response there is that we're very much supporting the council, and we're working with the council in its review through that transformation board. Next point was the impact of inflation. Has that been included on the business plan? The business plans are a current cost basis, but what we have done is that we have looked at the inflationary pressures on procurement and looking at the supply chains that could be affecting us. And we have really reflected within our business plans a trading pattern that we feel quite happy can deliver if there are inflationary pressures put onto those supply chains. Next slide, please. And is the competitiveness of the companies bold enough? Again, this was a fairly in-depth question and discussion at G&A. I think one of the things that is quite important that the companies have traded successfully through the pandemic and have traded very well exiting the pandemic. CCCHL there, as we have said, is really a very good inward-looking business. It does serve the council very well, and it does support the strategic priorities of the council. What we are now doing is that we are now looking to expand our activities, and our events business are doing very well. And indeed, they are actually now doing the events management for 4 other local authorities. What we're also looking at in the previous slide that you mentioned was looking at other funding sources and how we're going to take that forward. Because what is really important, what will be driving the profitability of the company is property development, housing development. And I know that there are many councillors who were walking around Northern Gateway only a few weeks ago, and we're having some very good in-depth discussions there. We have got some issues, obviously, with the MRP consultation, and we are really waiting to see what comes out of that MRP consultation and the need to drive a larger housing pipeline. We've spoken slightly a little bit about Vineyard and the town centre master plan and the importance of seeing those sites coming through as part of the overall master development. Next slide, please. talking about duplications in the services between CBC and CCHL, a question raised by the chair of GNA. And I really emphasised the point that we have got this service level agreement. So the companies are paying in this particular year £655,000 back to the council for the use of those services that are actually listed there. So I'm very happy that there is no duplication of services of any real significance, and it's really demonstrated by the fact that we are contributing towards some of those core services that sit within the companies. Next slide, please. And then finally, it was wanting clarity on the timeline for the delivery of the 350 new homes, a question that came up from Councillor Fox. So I've just confirmed that the delivery of those properties will be concluded in 2025. Next slide, please. I just want to finish up with what we are looking at for our business plan for the next 4 years, which is in line with the Council's 4-year budgetary plans. So you can see that next financial year, we've got £250,000 coming through. That is predominantly our existing activities that we're doing now. And what creates the large increase in the remaining 3 years is the delivery of the housing at Colchester Northern Gateway, which is going to be the significant quantum change in the activities of the companies and its dividend that is going to be able to pay back to the council. And then last slide. So thank you very much indeed, Chair and councillors. That concludes the very short presentation, which clears the points raised at the Governance and Audit meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. I just have a couple of questions, if that's okay. Just about the tax. Obviously, we are seeing or going to see quite a big uplift in corporation tax in the next few years, from 19% to 25%. I appreciate the group relief, but are we doing everything we can within allowed tax rules to effectively minimise the amount of money which comes back to the council via profits and dividends? Because actually, obviously, that's not a particularly tax efficient way of getting the money back to the council, because we're paying 25% of it in corporation tax. My second question is about the duplication. I mean, I did think of one area where there's competition. Project management, we have an Amphora project management company, but CBH also does not dissimilar project management. That is perhaps one area where we have admittedly an arm's length, but nonetheless connected with the council organisation. You know, there does seem to be that we have got small elements there which are competing with one another, I think. So I just wondered if you wanted to comment on that.
Thank you, Chair. First question on the taxation. Yes, we are doing everything possible to minimise the taxation through the group relief and also on the internal services. One of the issues that we have got to always be aware of is that we are commercialising the activity, so we are really making profit. And on that profit, we do have to pay corporation tax. We are consistently taking advice with regard to how we operate the companies to make sure that we are providing as much of the surpluses that we make back to the council. On the second point of duplication, yes, about that, CBH, they manage the HRA, so the housing stock. There are some services in there will be looked at through a transformation board.
I know CBH, they manage the project. Yeah, so there's an example of where perhaps, but equally I know like Amphora are managing the community centre. So there is kind of competition. They're kind of both managing external projects. So it's just one example. Councillors, anybody else got any other questions or comments? So, So Adrian has, yes. Councillors and officers, have you got any other questions or comments?
Chair, apologies. All I was going to do is just a point of clarification, which is that Councillor Homes tend to manage our assets, so our corporate assets, so we own the Mercury, manage those. Whereas Amphora manages a lot of the capital projects the Borough Council is involved in and other projects for others. So there is but I absolutely accept both have project management capability, and therefore, is there any duplication or is there an opportunity to make better use of those project management resources? Thank you.
Thank you. No, I think that's a very good point. So, Councillor Ellis.
Yeah, a tiny point, and it's just actually about capacity. Or just you've talked about the Northern Gateway and what we're trying to do out there. And I know that's a big project because I came around it with you, and fascinating and very exciting it is as well. We also, you've just touched on something I was talking about earlier, which is master planning in the town centre, which I'm sure you will be very involved with. I just wonder, have you got, and you talked about Vineyard Street, which would be part of that, and then we've got Britannia and what have you, and there are various other parcels, as you know, that we're going to be looking at. So have you got the capacity to deal with that yourselves? Have we thought about what sort of relationship have you got, for instance, with Essex Housing for potentially, and are we in a position where we could joint venture, Amphora could joint venture with other arm's length bodies? Is that something we've looked at?
Thank you very much. Very good questions. On capacity point of view, yes, we have. We have got a very good dedicated team. We have got good qualified experts who are within our organisation. And indeed, we have now appointed our master architect for the Northern Gateway. We've also appointed our highway consultant again today, so that we can take forward all the highway designs, and we will be building up the consultants team over the coming weeks to deliver the Northern Gateway total project. With regard to the other sites, yes, there are other sites that we will be looking at, and yes, we will be looking at potentially partnering. And the amazing coincidence is I'm actually having a meeting with Essex Housing tomorrow morning. Is it Glenn or Gwyn? Glenn, I'm meeting Glenn tomorrow morning. And I am going to be having another couple of meetings next week where I'm going to be looking at other partnering solutions to explore all those avenues for growth and actual synergy as well.
Thank you. Actually, I've just got one more question, actually. In the presentation, you said that because the council CBC required maximum benefit in terms of payback, if you like, from Amphora or CCHL, it would all be being paid out in dividends, and you wouldn't be retaining money on the balance sheet. But certainly earlier in the year, we spoke about the fact that going forward, CCHL would need money on its balance sheet, particularly around the housing company when it's looking to take options potentially on other development opportunities. So do you think that that is going to be a negative constraint on CCHL if that's the situation? And if so, by how much?
Thank you. The requirement to grow the balance sheet to facilitate external funding is an issue that needs to be taken forward. But the companies were set up to commercialise activities to help fund the council's services to the borough, and that's its prime objective in supporting the council. In addition to that, there is a desire to grow the companies. And one of the things that we are going to be looking at in this year is looking at private funding. So moving away from total reliance on the council to provide the funding through the Public Loans Work Board. And that's part of the reasons why we've got the Levelling Up Housing and Communities looking at MRP to actually make sure that the investments of local authorities are going to be well funded and can actually be secured. So what we're going to be looking at is, can there be some retention to actually slowly build up over the years? But we can't get away from the fact that if we can drive forward our business, looking at the LFFN, looking at the local full fibre network and the surpluses that that can deliver to the council and also be commercialised through the companies, looking at how we're going to be taking forward our innovative heat network and how that is going to actually be one of the largest heat networks in the country, extracting heat from the chalk aquifer in this country. This is really quite pathfinding stuff that we're doing, which is going to give us the ability to move forward in that. If we go forward with a microgrid, we can then actually be an energy producer, which can then also make more money for the council. I've already mentioned the events business and how successful they are. And if you link that through with housing and getting private funding so that we can go off and acquire other sites and be more of a small housing developer for the council, that is where we're going to be making our money. That is going to give the opportunities to procure outside of the public authorities' procurement frameworks, because we'll then not be spending public money. We'll actually be then utilising private money, which will then give us the ability to look more carefully to see whether or not we can actually retain some of the surpluses and build up the reserves, strengthen the balance sheet, make the companies more interesting to other external funders. Because right now, if we were to go off and seek funding, we'd have to do mainstream funding, then do mezzanine funding. And you're then getting into high levels of interest rate, which are unattractive for the activities of what we want to do. So it's quite a complicated process of what we've got to look at to make sure that we can actually build the companies. And it's not going to be something that's going to happen over the next 2 to 5 years. This is going to be a longer term plan to build, strengthen these companies while still supporting Colchester Borough Council and its strategic priorities.
Thank you. I mean, I think it's also important to remember when we talk about strengthening balance sheets, the balance sheet doesn't have to be cash. So if the companies are acquiring assets like a heat network, which they own, then that will by nature strengthen, particularly if they're making profits, they become a valuable commodity on the balance sheet. So I think that's a very good point. Councillor Ellis.
I don't know whether I don't know if this is the right place to ask this, but I'll ask it, and you can tell me whether it is or not. And I don't know that Paul whether he can answer it. Is this something that our pension fund can invest in? I'm looking at Adrian here. I'm just sorry. I'm thinking you're going out to market to borrow money to grow the business, and I'm just asking, if we've got a business which we think is a good investment, is it possible for a local authority pension fund to invest in its own company, which is generating profit and therefore money back into that pension fund? I'm just positing the question, and perhaps it's been asked and answered or not.
I think Adrian would like to answer.
Chair, what I would say is I know that the government are encouraging pension funds to look at investing in infrastructure and commercial opportunities further than they have already. Of course, it's an Essex pension fund. It has a large number of authorities in it. The County Council, all the districts, the 2 unitaries, and a range of other public agencies. But I would agree with you that actually that could well be at least a conversation to have with the Essex Pension Fund. What I would also say, Chair, is things like the Local Government Association, they have a loan scheme as well, which again is something else that I know the Borough Council and Colchester Commercial Holdings Limited are looking at exploring as part and parcel of this alternative set of funding arrangements. And what the Local Government Association does is it pulls together a lot of local authorities' requests for borrowing, it puts it up as a bond, and then the market comes in and actually picks up that bond. So again, there are different opportunities and different ways of trying to fund, if that helps, Chair.
Thank you. Yeah, yes, it does. I could probably ask another 10 questions, but relax. I'm not going to, because they're probably for another time. I think there's all sort of questions about, you know, as the companies grow, governance structures and everything, but that's not what we're considering tonight. Has anybody else got any other questions to ask before we move to the recommended decision? Councillor Lissimore.
Not a question, but again, just a thank you to officers. Obviously, you know, things have been very difficult over the last couple of years, and I've been very, very proud to be involved in the last municipal year with CCHL, and also thank Councillor Tate for presenting this evening as well.
Thank you. So the recommended decision is to review the progress and achievement of the companies during 21-22, noting the minutes of the Governance and Audit Committee on the 18th of January 22, which I think we certainly have. I think we've covered those and you covered them very well in your presentation. So thank you for that. And to agree the 4 business plans of the Council's companies for 22 to 26. Are we in agreement? We are. That is unanimous. Paul, Lee, thank you very much for coming on this evening. I'm sorry it's taken a while to get to your item, but there are other items to come as well. So thank you very much. So we'll move on to item 9.1. Now we have 2 members of the public and 3 councillors. What I'm going to do, if I'm allowed to, is change the order slightly and allow the people present to go first. So we'll have Angela Linghorn-Baker, then the written statement by Luke Hayes, and then Councillor King, and then written statements by Councillor McCarthy and Barton. I think that's a fairer way round in case they need to go. So we'll have Angela Linghorn-Baker, please. You have 3 minutes. Bell will sound after 2.
Thank you, Chair, and good evening, everyone. So I first joined the campaign about 2 years ago when I met Pauline Hazel. As somebody who grew up in Shrub End and used to use the courts, I was really disheartened to see sort of what state of repair they were in, the fact that you couldn't access them or book them, and I felt that it was really sad. And as I said, Councillor Hazel was doing a fantastic campaign over many years to get the courts reinstated, and I decided to join her in that campaign. The first thing I did really was speak to residents, and had a lot of questions about what the development was, the fact that there was not really much communication went out to them. And really, I think the overwhelming response was that people didn't want houses there. They wanted green space, whether that was because of COVID or just because they wanted sports and recreation. And in a survey, we had a unanimous, almost unanimous decision that people wanted to preserve the area for sports. So I'm really pleased to see that the courts are now being considered more for sports. I know a lot of people have said that it's not important, it's only in one area, but actually it doesn't just affect Shrub End or South Colchester. It affects everywhere. It's the only municipal courts we have. And I think at a time when we're looking at people maybe facing financial hardships, actually to have something that they can go to, there isn't wasting public funds, there isn't costing money. You know, we're not paying to have surveys and things carried out on them. It's actually going to be an income generation, and I think actually that should be a very positive story. So really what I wanted to ask is for a commitment that this was going to be a step forward to look for long-term plans for sports in Colchester, and that residents would continue to be engaged as they have been. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, obviously we hope it is a step forward. That's the reason behind tonight's decision. hopefully, like all these things, the plan comes together, it would involve a considerable amount of private investment and also money from the LTA. That's an opportunity which has come up, which perhaps a year ago we weren't expecting. And one of the reasons why we've had to move quite quickly on this is to take advantage of it, because as we all know, with funding available or external funding, if you don't grab it, somebody else does. So that's been one of the reasons behind the urgency on this. I think we'll talk about the surveying later on, but I do know there's been quite a lot of independent surveying going on as to people's views around there. And it seems that there isn't a great deal of support for the site of use of housing. Surprisingly, there didn't seem to be a great deal of support for a medical centre on the site either. Residents seem to feel it was the wrong location or wasn't easily accessed or whatever, but certainly from which perhaps slightly surprised me, but that seemed to be what came back. But yes, I really hope it will be a step forward. I think it's a good opportunity. I do think what we have learned is there's a lot of interest in this site. We've certainly learned from the LTA that they believe in their demand survey that 6 courts, a minimum of 6 courts, are required at that site, and that includes even if the garrison courts are opened up. They say that we still need to retain courts at Udo Road. So yes, I hope it's a step forward. Thank you.
Just to say thank you, really, and yes, certainly I've the conversations I've had with people, they didn't want a medical centre, so I'd agree. But thank you for your efforts.
Thank you. So we have a written statement from a member of the public, which our Democratic Services Officer is going to read when the clock finishes.
Thank you, Chairman. This is a submission from Luke Hayes, and it's as follows. Good evening, and thank you for taking the time to listen to my submission. I would like to appeal to you all regarding the Udo Road tennis courts that are on the agenda for tonight. I have several concerns with the way this consultation on the tennis courts has been put together. Firstly, the consultees were such a small section of the wider communities in the area. The response surely cannot be seen as an accurate average view of all the people that will be affected. Of the people consulted, there were only 19 responses, considering that these facilities are used by people from 3 neighbouring wards, not just Shrub End. With circa 4,000 bookings per annum and a further 135 annual members, 19 responses is woefully low. Could the question really be marked as answered when only 14% of the annual members, not including the wider pay-to-play public, answered? Secondly, I would like to say before I make this point that I'm fully behind the development of the facilities at Udo Road. Modernisation is completely required of the facilities here. However, the reasoning for it to be contracted out and then run by a third party seems strange to me. With fantastic council-owned facilities at the Northern Gateway and at Leisure World, how can it be justified by the current administration that Udo Road cannot be run in the same way? There is an argument to be made that the council runs its sporting facilities incredibly well already. Why can we not run the tennis courts in much the same way? Were the public consulted with the idea that a council-run tennis courts, were the public consulted with the idea that a council-run property could be considered too? I ask, as I was unfortunately out of the scope of the members of the public that were consulted about this project. Finally, when you move a public-owned sports facility into private ownership, you limit access based on income. By removing an easily publicly accessible sports facility such as this, the health and well-being of members of the public that cannot afford an annual membership is directly affected. To summarise, I urge the council to not remove a public asset and hand it to a private firm. Can it really be right that a person's health and well-being is put at risk solely on if they can afford a monthly or annual commitment to a membership? We should be investing in our services, not cutting it off just to hand it over to someone else. If a third party can make it profitable, surely the council can too.
Thank you. I'll just pick up on a couple of those points. Obviously around the consultation, we did have to move quite quickly on it. We would have perhaps liked a wider consultation, but this has been actually consulted on quite a lot. And obviously part of some of the consultees were the clubs. So obviously the clubs are quite entitled to respond for a considerable number of members. On the public-private issue, I just want to be clear because I think there's some confusion about this. All the existing courts in use for public use are going to be retained by CBC. So the existing public tennis courts will remain public tennis courts, completely owned and ultimately controlled by CBC. The area which we're talking about a potential lease on is mainly currently derelict and fenced off. So it's not actually providing any sporting facilities at all. So what we're looking at hopefully is an addition to what is there at the moment, rather than taking any public service away and moving it into the private sector. And being realistic, we haven't, or nobody recently has found the capital financing necessary to perhaps redevelop those derelict sites. And I think if a private supplier, investor, whatever you want to call them, can do so and is prepared to invest a considerable amount of money into Colchester, I think we do need to look at it seriously. But obviously, we need to see exactly what it will offer. We can put conditions in the lease, and I think we will take account of public need. But just to reiterate, anything which is available to the public at the moment, the idea is it remains in public hands. Sorry, Councillor Laws, you indicated.
Just to quickly intervene if the member of the public is still listening, and it's worth clarifying that precedent has been set in this area from the previous Labour and Lib Dem administration, who leased out the Upper Bowls Green in Castle Park, which was an example of bringing in a private contractor to take on an unused space and produce a result which means that Colchester has a better facility. We've retained the freehold of the site, and this is the same principle here. So I think it'd be churlish to resist the opportunity to bring about regeneration to the site whilst retaining the freehold and seeing an enhancement. As the leader says, at the moment, it's completely inaccessible. So this is a very sensible, pragmatic approach, which the previous Labour administration has done before. So I have no problem with it at all.
Thank you. And of course, just to add, actually, in that vein, part of the site is already in the hands of somebody else because the tennis club has a lease on it. So that's not publicly accessible at the moment, even though there is a relationship between CBC and them. It's a private club. Thank you for that, and thank you to our public have your says on that. We'll move to councillor contributions, and we'll have Councillor King first because he's waited very, very patiently. He did think about, I know, zooming literally home and then zooming in, but thank you for staying. Good evening.
Good evening, Leader, colleagues, Cabinet, good to see you. I think I'd just like to sort of say, first of all, that I welcome, despite the coldness in my part of the room, I'm sure it's warmer up here. I welcome the welcome and the remarks earlier this evening about our colleague Nick Cope and the private messages too. And if we can't just stop, and we have, and just acknowledge what unites us, you know, which is, frankly, to say it, friendships, and rubbing along with each other well over the years, it would be a shame. So thank you for that. I welcome also the remarks about Ukraine and support, something we talked about in governance and audit last night, Leader, how our borough of sanctuary has to mean something. And so we've got to press upwards. This is beyond politics because it's cross-party. We have to press upwards to government, get their act in order. We have to do what we can to get ready. And also, and I've had conversations with several of you, I'm on the same page, and so are my colleagues in the Liberal Democrat Party and the other parties on standards. Respect and courtesy matter, but we're not hanging people out to dry. Errors happen. They happen in every party. We just get over it, move on, and just remember, back to Nick Cope, you know, friendship and respect for each other that matters. It's not why I'm here, though. I wanted genuinely to say to you, this is personal. This is your last cabinet meeting of the municipal year. You probably guessed that. I want to just acknowledge the challenges you bear for the borough council. You represent all of us, as well as the residents. That's a significant responsibility. And I know you put your hearts into it. And the conversation we've had, Councillor Harris, continuity matters. So I'm really pleased. I see lots of our past programme in your programme tonight, but there will be things that will change. And one of the conversations, when and if there is a change of administration, and we're so close, that tends to be one sometimes, it will always be about taking the best and taking it forward. I wanted to talk tonight briefly to you about Udo Road. This item, obviously, in the knowledge that a couple of my colleagues have got things to say as well, and I suspect we're going to cover some of the same ground. And this is not, to use a phrase, churlish. This is just to acknowledge that this has been slow moving and stuck and an issue of contention. I welcome, and my colleagues I think will welcome, anything that will bring better. We shouldn't stand on a point of who has done what, when, where. What we should really do is say, is this the right kind of approach? Anything that brings investment into Colchester and that makes life better for our residents, whether it's tennis courts or you know, or bowling or putting, or who cares? You know, anything that makes life better, we have to be in support of. There is a fair conversation about that balance. We as a last administration struggled to find it between the needs to finance change, the need to look at what is a deficit, in this case in NHS investment, and the ability to get a dentist and a GP locally. And I do think that when we talk about responses back, it does depend on how we ask the question when it comes to consultations. So my personal view is this takes us a big step forward in the right kind of direction. But I do ask you, and maybe you can't, maybe you won't, to consider your recommendation on 2.2. If you have the time, you should take the best, as we would, of what you have in front of you in terms of Lawn Tennis Association investment potential. But the whole of the site deserves a wider review, and the issue specifically of whether or not the sum of the site can do the balance we just touched on between LTA and sport and green space, and something to meet a real fundamental human need about local facilities, medical facilities, without denying that you've got investment coming. I think that'll be really good to go round this again. There's still time. One does not necessarily exclude the other, would be my request for you, to sort of consider what you can pause and rerun the consultation, not to deny the progress made, which I welcome, but to have a look at what else you can do that would have a deeper, richer consultation than, there is no disrespect in saying this, than 19 responses. You know, it's what you would say to us quite fairly, and it's my challenge back to you. So thank you for the progress made, but I think there's further to go. My colleagues have left you messages. I'll wait and see what they've got to say. But that's my request, Leader, to you and your colleagues. Leave yourself and us some space to take this further. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'll certainly endorse earlier comments made there, particularly about Ukraine. And thank you for the comments you're recognising it is the last cabinet of the civic year. With the medical centre, the NHS, I know there has been quite a lot of conversations about it. One of the reasons, to be honest, though, we held off doing anything with this is that we were waiting for the NHS. They had talked about putting their own survey out. We did contact them and said, well, look, we're thinking about this. We've got an opportunity. Have you got any comment to make? We didn't get a great response, to be absolutely honest. So we rather ran out of patience, I think, a little bit. We kind of thought, well, hang on, if you're not really going to show a lot of real interest in this, then why should we sit there and do nothing with the site and leave it for more and more years when we've got a good opportunity and we've got investors interested? So that was the real, we did probably delay it for 3 or 4 months. We could have done this 3 or 4 months ago, and we didn't, because we were still looking at the possibility perhaps around a medical centre. But really, if you don't get somebody, if you've got 3 potential uses for it and 2 investors keep phoning you up and are very, very keen and very, very proactive, and the other one doesn't really seem remotely interested, you get to the point that you think, well, actually, we need to take a decision on this. So that was really the driving force behind it. I mean, I don't know other portfolio holders, you were in the same meetings. That was certainly the impression I got. So we were quite surprised, actually, that they weren't a little bit more proactive. And how long did we wait? How many years did we wait for something to happen with it still sitting there, empty, doing nothing? And then we miss other opportunities of investment, which we might be kicking ourselves for. So that was the honest truth really around that. We did look at, in fact, I asked officers to go away and put potential business cases together, possibly around building a medical centre on a commercial basis without housing development. In other words, we financed the building of it. We was never going to be offered to anybody for free. It was going to be rented and bring in a commercial rent. But unless somebody actually really came along and said, this is what we need, this is what we want to do, then we couldn't really put that together, because we were sadly lacking in guidance as to what would actually be needed there, what the demand was. And the NHS still have not done their survey. So that was the reason behind it.
A brief thank you for that. I think that will be helpful, and you without covering all of the same ground, when you hear from local councillors, which I know it matters to all of us, that the local voice of councillors who do connect with those they serve, a response along those lines, or perhaps a fuller explanation might be helpful, with just my suggestion. When in the last administration, the representatives of the NHS started off this discussion, and that's now some years ago, so I take the point about time. There was no question that there was an acceptance of demand. It was about a question of finding a solution. So my only response, I think, to you, Leader, would be to sort of say that to the extent you can, given there's a journey yet to go between where we are now and what gets signed up, whoever has this prospect post-May, that it's really important that we shape it so that we do not exclude the possibilities of a slow-moving bureaucracy in the NHS getting to the point of delivering us and the people of Shrub End solutions that could be really beneficial. And I do say the same thing, bear with me. The shaping of a consultation drives, and the timing allowed for it drives the response. And I think there is a deep well of need. And I think if we accept that, then we perhaps could return to this in the future. And I'd ask that we do so. Thank you for the second bite.
Thank you. Just to add, I'd agree with you. I don't think there's any doubt about, particularly around GP services, the need in the area. I think that's quite clear. But in terms of actually developing a tangible plan, they need to engage with us as well to actually deliver that. And there are other bits of land there, so who knows in the long term, but never say never. But in terms of actually trying to get something off the ground, which actually did something with that site, which we felt would have good public support and also work from the financial point of view, we felt, I still feel, we need to get on and do something while the opportunity is there. Other things may or may not happen in the future. Thank you. And it is quite cold at this end of the room as well, I can assure you. Okay, thank you. We have written statements from two councillors, Councillor Barton and Councillor McCarthy, or Councillor McCarthy and Councillor Barton, actually, in that order. My apologies. So, Richard, I think you're going to read them out.
Thank you, Chairman. I'll start with Councillor McCarthy. Good evening, Cabinet. My apologies that I cannot be with you to discuss this item tonight that I feel is so overdue. I wish to keep my statement short, as most of my thoughts are in line with Councillor Barton's statement to be read next. My plea is to depoliticise this issue. I've been active in local politics for 6 years and the councillor for 3. During that time, every single piece of literature from the Conservatives distributed throughout Shrub End has been an attack at the Lib Dem councillors for supporting house building at the site. This is not, has not, and will not ever be the case. Whilst we recognise that it could not continue in its current format with such losses, we are still open to options for part of the site. South Colchester sorely lacks in sports facilities, and we do believe that the court should still operate alongside another avenue for revenue and funding. 19 responses to the consultation is poor. However, we know from our own experience of speaking with residents on the doorstep that the issue is wider. I'm sure more people wish to voice their concerns and thoughts. As I mentioned, please depoliticise this and cease from the untruths in your literature. Let us work together cross-party. Along with our colleagues in Newtown and Christchurch, we should have open forums with residents on what they would like to see. I support recommendations 2.1 and 2.3, but ask that you think very carefully about 2.2. My vote is for a medical centre and or further consultation with residents. Many thanks.
Thank you. I'll just come back on that briefly before we have Councillor Barton's submission. Depoliticising it, I think a big move to depoliticising it would be if we all, we do not support housing on the site. We never have done. So I think if we all end up on the same page that all parties are absolutely committed to not developing that site for housing, I think that would be a big step towards depoliticising it. So I think if we can all make clear statements that we will not, whatever colour, shape, shade of administration may emerge over the next few years at various different intervals, and who knows, we could get many of them. I think if we all say publicly we're on the same page that we will not be developing that site for housing, then I think that would be a big step towards depoliticising all of it. I mean, I know there were, when we took over, we saw the plans. We know there were plans. We know there was money spent developing plans for housing. I will take Councillor McCarthy at his word that he wasn't aware of them, but he might perhaps want to talk to some of his cabinet colleagues from last year, because they did exist. We have seen them. They're in quite a lot of detail, and there was quite a lot of money spent. But perhaps if we can get that commitment from all parties, then that would be a big step to calming everybody down and working together better. And I'd also endorse his comments. I think he said that he favoured the public courts operating alongside a new offering. Well, that is exactly the plan. So I think we're on the same page on that as well. Thank you.
And from Councillor Barton. Good evening, Cabinet. I'm sorry I can't be here in person, but I have another council commitment this evening. I recognise the problems associated with this site and understand that as a council we cannot continue to subsidise the tennis facility at taxpayers' expense. However, I am concerned that the consultation period was somewhat short and generated only 19 responses. Surely this devalues it, and you cannot base future planning on this outcome. I feel this should be revisited and a full proper consultation undertaken. I note with surprise that you are marketing a large middle section of the site, thus dividing it up with a private facility in the centre. Normally, I would expect one end or the other to be chosen, so there will be a commercial restriction preventing the leaseholder from building houses at some time in the future. I understand and support CBC retaining the first part for continued tennis provision, but residents have contacted me from the outdoor bowling club and tennis players asking for clarification over the car park, which is included in the section to be marketed. Can you guarantee that whoever leases the site will retain this car park for users of the above facilities? If not, where will they park? Secondly, residents want to know that if the car park is still available, will it continue to be free of charge? Finally, our preferred option was for a medical centre and dentistry provision, much needed in Shrub End, with the proceeds allowing the tennis courts to be upgraded. Please can this be explored? Thank you.
Thank you. I mean, I think I've covered some of those points. Just to explain the car park, one of the reasons it's offered the way it is that some of the commercial operators who expressed an interest actually felt the car park was inadequate. So it's quite likely that the car park will actually be enlarged and possibly moved to a slightly different part of the site. And to put it quite simply, that was the area which worked, and that was the area which the interest was in. In terms of leaseholder potentially building houses, well, that won't be possible because the site is advertised for sports use only. The lease will be for sports use only. They won't have a freehold. They won't be able to do what they like with it. So they will not have any possibility whatsoever of being able to develop the site for anything other than we grant the lease for. In terms of the details of the car park, will it be free or not? That would be probably for more detailed discussions. There might be something we can discuss in the lease on that, but that is obviously something we'd have to discuss once we get beyond the expressions of interest and into any detailed negotiations with any third parties. And I think the other points I hope I've already covered in the other points given and have your say. If I've forgotten any, I'm sure other people will jump in. No, they won't. Well, perhaps I don't know if that means that I haven't forgotten any or not. So, yeah, I mean, I think just to cover up this item off, as I said earlier, we don't support developing it for housing because it's not perhaps like some other sites where you can easily move the space over the road or swap around things. It's about the only green space left in that area. And we do have to think slightly longer term. Yes, you could say, well, great, we could develop it or something. It would bring us a bit of cash in. We'd spend that. And I think we need to think not just about us, we need to think about the people who are going to be here in 50 years' time. People before us did. They built us facilities. They built us this room, okay, in 1901, which we are still using today. So we've got 100 years out of it so far. It's been rather good value in that respect. And there are many, many things like that in Colchester. The visions with people who built Castle Park, people who built the castle, if you like. And if we just cover over every single bit of green space because it brings in a bit of short-term cash, yes, it'll help us for a little while, it will. But I think the people in 50 years' time will look back on us and say, well, actually, you know what? That wasn't a very good long-term investment because actually they spent all the money within 3 or 4 years and they might have done a little bit of good, but what's it left us with? So I think there has to be a balance. And this plan, if we can bring it off, it delivers new, refurbished, high-quality tennis courts, still open to the public, still owned by the public, hopefully combined with much better marketing and things that are like coaching sessions and things. It could bring a new sports offering to Colchester we don't currently have. It could turn a loss-making facility into a profitable one and will bring in rent for the lease or annual rent on the bit which is leased out to the private sector. It also hopefully will enable us to get a better deal with the tennis club, put them in a bit more of a long-term setting because they're on a bit of an ad hoc lease basis. In fact, it turns out possibly there isn't even a lease in place. It's just sort of done on the back of an envelope. And it's possible that we might be able to get a much better deal around the maintenance part of that. So I think it could be a really, really good thing for Udo Road, and it will bring a lot of certainty after a lot of uncertainty to the residents around there and secure it for the long-term benefit of the residents of Colchester. So we're not actually deciding to sign a lease tonight. What we're deciding is delegating to the portfolio holder for resources, but I would really encourage everybody to get behind this. Let's depoliticize it, but that means getting behind it, everybody. There's a good opportunity here. If we don't take it, it's going to disappear. So let's do so. And Councillor Harris.
I was just going to pick up on a point you just made about not building on every bit of green space. Actually, this site sits adjacent to Prettygate, which is the most deprived ward in green space in the borough. There really isn't very much of it when you look at it. So I think it's vital that we maintain it as and I'm someone that is very involved with development, obviously, with my portfolio, and actually one of my great interests. But I think you're absolutely right, Leader, you can't build on every bit of green space. This has been a nettle that has needed grasping for some time. I think we've always, and I know we're talking about depoliticising it, and I don't think it should ever really have been a political issue, but it's always been, I think, from certainly one of the ward councillors' point of view, she hasn't felt that sufficient investment has been made in it. Whether that's right or not, I don't know, but it's something that hasn't been generating an income, and it has been making, so it's been making a loss, and it's something that has needed to be addressed. So, and I get what Councillor King is saying regarding a medical facility and doctors and a dentist. So, but I mean, we've looked at this right from the get-go. It's one of the first things we looked at, I think, as a cabinet when we came in and we were shown plans for 130 houses, and that would help us get a medical facility. Actually, I don't think that was a price worth paying for the medical facility. I think there are other bits of land, as you say, and I think it's important that we do find something if that's what's needed in that area. And God knows we do need some NHS dentists, don't we, Councillor King? I think that's something that we do need to find, but not at the expense of this particular piece of land. So I'm perfectly happy to go with the recommendation, Chairman.
Thank you. Anybody else? No, I see nobody indicating. So I think we'll move to the recommended decisions, which are on page 265. I won't read them all out because they're quite long, but they're recommended 2.1, 2.2 and 2.3. Councillors, are we in agreement to approve these? Agreed. That's unanimous. Thank you very much.
It's not about sterilising the site from ever having a medical provision, is it? It's about sterilising the site effectively for development of housing and providing the sports.
Yeah, I mean there are other areas there. So yeah, long term this could be done, and actually there is potentially, should there actually be support for it, options around medical centres, but this is about grasping an opportunity for a site which needs some investment. So thank you. We'll move on to item 10, which is communities, which is business case for grounds maintenance contract delivery model. This is Councillor Oxford's department. Would you like to say anything about it, Councillor Oxford?
Well, just a bit, because I have already spoken about it earlier on this evening. This has been to policy panel and had agreement there. I do realise that they were quite disappointed, I think, that they wanted it to be done a lot sooner than it is going to be done. But in the end, I think they saw the rationale behind why you can't do things as quick as you might like. I also want to give assurances that just because we are potentially deciding to extend the contracts, it does not mean that the people providing the grounds maintenance now are being let off the hook. Quite the opposite. They are being looked at, they are being watched, they are being made fully aware that we expect a good service and we will have a good service, and they know this. So I wanted to make sure that other councillors might think, well, we're going to give them an easy ride for the next 3 years. We're definitely not. I think this is quite an exciting opportunity for the council, because we can do things in a different way by getting the community involved in things that they might not think they would be involved in, give them the opportunity to perhaps do composting, community gardens, various other different bits and pieces that have never really been explored before. But I want to make sure that it is done in a proper way, in a proper time, as I've said before. And to do it, you have to take time in doing it. You can't expect to suddenly have a depot spring up out of nowhere where you can put the fleet that you actually haven't got. So all these things need to be explored, need to be done properly. And as I said before, I think we have no alternative but to extend the contract for 3 years while we work it up properly to do it properly. And that's about it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Oxford. And you know, I do know when you took over this portfolio back at the end of May, you inherited a difficult situation because the contract was underperforming. There was long grass everywhere, and I would like to thank all the work you and the officers did to performance manage that contract and really bring things back on track. Hopefully that will show dividends as the grass starts to grow, if and when spring ever comes. But I would really like to say thanks for that and well done. I do remember when we first started talking about this, and I kind of made, I think I made the comment, what, we don't even own a strimmer? And the answer was we didn't, I think, because why would we? So the practicalities of actually doing this and bringing this back in-house and effectively setting up our own quite grounds maintenance company of significant size obviously requires significant capital investment and a lot of logistics. So I do get the argument totally, and I do support you very much in this. So has anybody else got any other comments? No. So I'm just going to check the recommended decision, which is on page 273. The recommended decision is to delegate authority to the Assistant Director of Environment to extend the contract with the existing contractor for 3 years in accordance with the existing terms, and to agree to the recommendations made by the policy panel at its meeting of the 12th of January 2022 and referred to in section 3 of this report. Are we in agreement? We are. That is unanimous. Again, thank you very much. Moving on to item 11, which is strategy. That's me. Corporate key performance targets. This is, I think I've seen this at every committee I've been to this year at some point in some iteration. We have discussed it at length. I think there were probably 2 changes we've made. One was around perhaps the presentation of housing targets that with our little speedos, we had a sort of minimum speed red zone, but we didn't have a maximum speed red zone. So that has been corrected. And there's also been some simplification around the homelessness targets, I believe, and performance, which I know have come up several years running, actually, governance and audit and scrutiny. So I think we have finally got around to improving those. I could read through them, or if you'd like me to, but equally on this particular one, I think we have looked at them in a lot of detail on a number of occasions. So I'd like to finally get them signed off by asking for agreement on them. Do we have agreement? We have agreement. Thank you very much. That was quick and easy. So we'll move on to number 12, housing and planning, 12.1, which is request for delegated authority to award of HRA contracts 22-23. Councillor Ellis.
Okay. As set out in the report, really, Leader, it's a unfortunately, decision taking doesn't neatly fit in, and contracts don't neatly fit in with the cabinet calendar, and that's why this report is here. Effectively, it's just asking for delegated authority to be able to make those decisions outside of those timescales. So it's been done for the previous few years, so I can't see why it shouldn't continue now, and it works.
I guess the question, colleagues, is do we trust Councillor Ellis? I don't know. What do we think?
I haven't so far.
I don't think I have much to add to it. The recommended decision is set out in 2.1, 2.2 and 2.3 on pages 373 and 374 of your agenda packs. Do we have agreement on this? We do. Thank you very much. And we'll move on to item 12.2. Which again is Councillor Ellis, which is award a contract for asbestos surveying.
Thank you. And again, it it's as read. I mean, if you look at 5.5, it says the programme is intended to renew all asbestos surveys to Colchester Borough Council's housing stock and corporate and commercial assets. This will be conducted over an anticipated 4-year period. The aim is for all properties to remain compliant and to complete surveys and ensure suitable and relevant documents are in place for each property in line with the 2012 asbestos regulations. It's something that we have to do. We've got a statutory duty to do it. It's been done in the past. It hasn't always been done. If I'm honest, it hasn't. We've had some issues when we've gone back and resurveyed some of the things. This is going to be picked up and done well. So I'm perfectly happy with it. I've been briefed, and I hope that cabinet members will agree that we should take this decision.
Thank you. Yes, I mean, obviously we can't discuss the actual contracts, but it will be in our confidential section at the end. If anybody,
after hours, yeah.
Yeah, if anybody wishes to raise any issues on that. So are we in agreement to take the recommended decisions, which is on page 379 and 380 of the agenda packs? We are. Thank you very much. Only they were all this quick. More. Item 12.3 is Councillor Ellis, which is award of contract for stairlift equipment. Councillor Ellis.
Okay. Again, it's as read. This is done through the procurement for housing and materials framework rather than going out to tender. Stana stairlifts have been providing a very good service to us already, and as you know, there's a very tiny pool of people that provide this particular service, and they are what's the word? Industry leading. I think you'd probably, if you think of a stairlift, the first thing you'll think of is probably Stana. But yes, it has been through a procurement exercise, and this is the decision that we wish to make. So, can we please agree to award the contract for stairlift equipment to Stana?
Thank you. As with the others, the recommended decision is set out on page 385, section 2, 2.1 and 2.2. I won't read them all out unless somebody asks me to. They are there for you to read them. So are we prepared to agree those as set out in the agenda pack? We are. Thank you. That is unanimous. Thank you. Item 13 general is progress of responses to the public, which is on page 391. Let me just get it up. There are responses there to Mr. Orton, Sir Bob Russell, Peter Crees, they're the three. Has anybody got any comments they wish to make on those responses? No, we do seem to have responded well on those, so I'm quite happy to recommend those. We're only noting it, so is that so noted? It is so noted. Thank you. Moving on to item 14, I'm going to move that in accordance with section 100A brackets 4 of the Local Government Act 1972 and in accordance with the Local Authorities Executive Arrangements, Meetings and Access to Information England Regulations 2012 to exclude the public, including the press, from the meeting so that any items containing exempt information, for example, personal, financial or legal advice in part B of this agenda, not printed on yellow paper, can be decided. The exempt information is defined in section 100I or 1001 and schedule 12A of the Local Government Act 1972. Are we agreed? We are agreed. All I can say is thank you very much for your contributions this evening to the public. Thank you to anybody listening online.